sink. They're always there.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to get to the bottom of it. Someone's always going to put a dish back in their sink.
That's a good analogy. Weird. Started this year, and that's one of the biggest work coaches is if you don't go home and you think things are done,
Good morning, everyone. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the third and final meeting of the Governor's Task Force on Health Care Workforce Shortages. I am Victoria Ford. I am the chair of the task force, and today we have with us Dr. Valerio, Kathy Thomas, Olga Rodriguez, Dr. Jackie Ward, Dr. Lori Rice Spearman, and Jamie Dudensing. Online, Dr. Zerwas is here. Hello, Dr. Zerwas. Anybody else online? Miranda, I can't tell. Okay. Nope, I think that's it. Okay. Thank everybody for being here. As you all will recall at the last meeting, we first heard from the summaries from the first two work group meetings, the workshops. And so we're going to do that today with our third and final workshop. Oh, hey, Jack Dwyer's here, also a task force member. Good to see you, Jack. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to start out hearing from our third and final work group. I do want to remind everyone that the report on for this task force is due to the governor on October 1st. So after today, we will not have any additional meetings, and we will be working through finalizing the feedback and the consensus and the recommendations from the workshop process, and put those into a report from the governor's office for that process going forward. Any stakeholder, advisory committee member, or task force member that has any additional specific recommendations or feedback that they wish to be considered as a part of that process, it needs to be submitted by Friday, September 6th. That's this week. So please submit that to, you can send it to me, you can send it to Sydney with staff with the Hired Coordinating Board, and get it to us by Friday. So thank you very much. And we will sort of get rolling. Oh, I do want to remind the task force members. So these are different mics. So there's the little button on the bottom that you push, and when your little green light comes on, then your mic is live. So please do that for the record so that it can be recorded. We are being televised on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's YouTube channel. I'm not really sure any more of those details, so don't ask me about that. For those of you who are on Zoom, if you can remember to unmute yourself. For any presenters who have a handout, please pass them over to the table over there, and we will get them passed out to everyone. And that's it. I think that's all of my housekeeping. So we'll start by introducing the co-chairs of Work Group 3. Work Group 3 was really our kind of exciting topic, if you will. They were talking about clinical preceptors and how to improve and expand on that process in the state, which is one of the major choke points in the nursing shortage. So we have Susan Greenwood, who is the Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer for Hendrick Health, and Jennifer Chilton, who's the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the School of Nursing at UT Tyler, very innovative program there. So we look forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much for your willingness to be co-chairs for us on this process.
Sure. Good morning. We too think our work group is the most exciting. We're super fired up to tell you all the information we have. We have lots of bullet points, and we're going to kind of stick to that so we don't talk all day, because we could. Our policy, my policy topic number 1, let me move this forward, is bolstering faculty and preceptors. And yes, can you hear me? A little bit closer, is that better? So I led the group talking about challenges and effective strategies to expand the availability of classroom faculty for the preparation of nurses. Our consensus points included Looking at the differences between practice and academic compensation eliminates RNs and APRNs the opportunity to be faculty at higher education institutions because they cannot afford the transition. The disparities between health science centers and academic institutions related to formula funding, salaries, and contracts, a 12-month contract versus a 9-month contract for nurse education does limit recruitment. Clinical nurses could be employed as part-time faculty if hospitals and academic institutions will consider new models of joint appointments. There's limited clinical space everyone's aware of, and clinical faculty, in order to get their students throughout the program, need to monitor students throughout a 24/7 period on weekends and nights. That's on top of their daily responsibilities of teaching during the week. There was consensus that MOU and affiliation agreements process is very challenging, and it limits clinical experiences that can, at our facility, can take as much as 8 months to sometimes get those lined out. Clinical management systems vary greatly among healthcare systems, making it difficult for students to access multiple clinical sites. There's money required for students to be able to pay to access these students, and then the requirements will differ, and the clinical faculty have to manage that process, as well as usually a full-time employee helping people manage that process in the institution. Oftentimes, adjunct faculty will leave education because of the differences in policies across facilities, and they'll prefer to stay at one single appointment. Definitely, there's experts needed related to AI and other technologies within nursing departments to help bridge the gap between education and clinical practice. There's the Nurse Faculty Loan Repayment Program, which everyone does appreciate, but it's only good for faculty with loans. Not all faculty do have loans. There's a $500 grant program for dependent family members of nurse educators. However, it would be great if that could be increased. There was suggestion that the onboarding process for faculty improve so that they are prepared for success. And part of that should be considering childcare benefits and as well as providing behavioral support for families. Some of the barriers that we determined between all the agencies is limited flexibilities on the credentials for potential faculty. There was suggestion that some clinical competencies be considered as well as degrees, maybe a combination of both. The required nurse-to-student ratio set by the Board of Nursing for clinical experience may no longer be relevant post-COVID, and we suggest perhaps piloting some other models in that. APRNs are required to work clinically to maintain their licensure and to teach in their specialty program. But for them, it's difficult to secure employment at a place that only allows you to work once a week. So that limits our opportunities to hire those people. MOU affiliation agreements are roadblock for student access because of the variation in hospital regulations. We'll start over there. And they're challenging to manage for all stakeholders. Again, we talked about limited clinical spaces, which requires constant monitoring by clinical faculty on nights and weekends. And because of those limited spaces, we'd like to increase simulation. However, there's variation in the simulations in terms of quality based on availability of expertise to lead it and teach it, as well as the expense of the programs. Compensation and childcare, there's compensation and childcare issues for faculty. When a faculty takes a day job and they have to leave at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to be at the hospital, they're not anticipating that when they do transition to education. Hospitals aren't flexible with nurse staffing to allow faculty hours, meaning if we could look at 2 12s and maybe a third 12 be an adjunct position, it just doesn't work well between the two institutions, and if we could be flexible on that. We want to look at hospital nurses aren't, just because, on the other hand, a good clinically trained expert doesn't mean they're a good educator, just as an excellent educator may not have the up-to-date clinical skills any longer. So those all roll into our recommendations, which is to consider policies that include competencies and not just degree into nursing education, fund training for nurse educators using AI and other advanced technologies for the classroom and simulation. We'd like to develop protocol about how to integrate virtual nursing into clinical training, because who is the student working with? The extender or the nurse? These are new problems that are coming out for us. We'd like to see standardized affiliation agreements and requirements for students across the board. And the BON does an excellent job screening every nurse applicant, student applicant for a program. And if they cannot enroll in nursing school until the board says that they're okay to do that, we'd like to see more support for the BON. Because if we increase the nursing students, they're going to need the support to manage that. We'd like to see funding equalized between health science centers and academic institution. Maybe consider state funding for faculty shift differentials for nights and weekends. Also address childcare availability for workforce with non-standard work hours. And schools of nursing can support hospitals by training clinical nurses and preceptors to help their adjuncts and preceptors be good educators. If you have good educators on the floor, those are the best recruiters for the hospital. If a student has a great experience with a preceptor, they're more likely to work at that facility. We'd like to see hospitals provide bridge training to allow faculty to become more clinically competent to work in a hospital setting. And then lastly, we'd like to see a state marketing campaign to highlight nurse educators and the profession of nursing. Thank you.
Okay, I would just like to echo Dr. Chilton saying thank you for this opportunity. It was really a great day. Our work group had lots of ideas, and so hopefully we've been able to condense those into some meaningful takeaways for you. So I led the policy topic group number 2. And what we were looking at is how we could increase the actual clinical training sites, and then how would we deal with the preceptors in those training sites to be able to train the nursing students. So first we agreed upon some statements, and those statements really crafted then what we recommended as solutions. And we had a long list of consensus statements, and I'll just go through those quickly. The first one is institutions bear the financial burden for multiple admission cycles. So when we were talking about increasing nursing students, when our training organizations have multiple admission cycles through the year, they bear the financial burden of those multiple admission cycles, and we'll see that bear out in our recommendations. Clinical hour requirements vary by training institution. The reason that's important is when you have a training institution that requires more hours, when another institution requires less hours, those additional hours are just hours that we could give to another nursing. We could somehow standardize those training hours. There's a lack of benefit for preceptors, and so that's one of the barriers to encouraging our nurses to be preceptors. This was a very profound statement. There are 14,000 qualified applicants for nursing school that were declined in 2023, while there were 5,000 training slots left unfilled. And so you're going to see that discrepancy play out in our recommendations. Unique and non-traditional clinical sites are available throughout the state. We also said that innovative and non-traditional settings, clinical experiences should be embraced. Hospital nurses are hesitant or refuse to precept, and some hospitals refuse to allow the precepting model. Incentive to precept is an effective recruitment tool, but the cost burden is unsustainable, and it's either borne by the training institution or the hospital. Clinical assignments and preceptor scheduling needs to be simpler. Students may not be always prepared for the college level experience and education. And our final consensus statement, which we feel like is one of the biggest ones, is that there should be greater collaboration between the state, institutions, academic centers, and hospitals. We saw pockets of excellence come out through the day that other entities were just completely unaware of, or were asking questions, how could we do that? And so we know that ongoing collaboration is a necessity. Some of the barriers that we had to take into account as we developed our solutions were formula funding for nursing programs hasn't been studied in about 30 years. And so this is where this plays back into when the institution allows multiple admission cycles to maximize our nursing graduates, they outspend the formula. Incentive for preceptors is an unfunded mechanism that the training institution and or the hospital has to bear, and a standardized incentive is not good because it doesn't work for all the preceptors. As Dr. Chilton said, one of the preceptors might have student loans, and that's an effective recruitment tool. Another one may not. Lack of a common database for student slots, clinical site availability, and preceptors leads to these gaps around the state and not maximizing our training opportunities. Hospital nurses lack formal training and preparation for preceptorship. We feel like that in some instances feeds into the hesitancy to be a preceptor. They just refuse when really they don't feel competent to be a preceptor. Lack of transparent data about clinical preceptors and student acceptance by organizations may fuel, or at least it doesn't uncover any of our organizations that are not willing to train nursing students. Also, when we talked about the innovative settings for nursing students, lots of issues came up around the legalities. And so we know that those can pose a barrier for putting students in innovative clinical settings. Student scheduling software is a financial burden that either the hospital or the training program has to bear the cost, or it is passed on to the student. Faculty having to struggle with the student having ESL literacy, life skills, or wraparound services. And then finally, the lack of academia hospital state partnerships leads to poor communication, knowledge gaps, and duplicative work for innovative programs. So out of those consensus statements and the barriers came a list of recommendations from our policy group 2. And that is, first, to standardize clinical hour requirements among programs. Again, to reiterate what Dr. Chilton said in her work group, we would like to evaluate a competency-based requirement versus a strict hourly requirement. We want to study and publish annually clinical preceptor hours and students per bed by organization so that information is transparent throughout the state. We want to develop a common platform for available slots in nursing programs so that students declined from admission from their program of choice could do similar to medical students when they go into the scramble. If training organizations posted somehow in a common platform their available slots remaining for the year, then students that were declined admission to their program of choice could go into the scramble. They might have to move, but they could at least possibly get into nursing school that year if they were willing to look at an available slot in another program. We'd like to develop a common platform for clinical site and preceptor availability. That might need to come with some funding for the student if that required travel or expense for them, but to develop a common platform for those training sites so that students could use available resources around the state. We want to create a statewide standardized toolkit for administrative burden to nursing education, and this came out loud and clear. A common database to deal with the legal issues. So if we put a nurse into a home health innovative setting, how do you deal with the legalities of having a student in a private home? How do you deal with the legalities of them driving their private vehicle or riding with a preceptor? That could be a toolkit that once developed anywhere around the state could use that. Affiliation agreements, playbooks for innovative programs such as a designated training unit. We just want to stop the duplication, and we want to develop a common toolkit that all organizations could use. We would like to see a state-funded standardized preceptor boot camp awarding continuing education hours. We talked about the spin model that UT Tyler developed, but some way to train our preceptors so that they're both competent and feel comfortable in that role. We'd like the ability to draw down state and federal dollars for organizations that provide preceptors, and you're going to see that modeled in the Senate Bill 25 that we'll talk about in a minute. We'd like to study and possibly change the formula funding for nursing programs and clinical preceptors. We'd like incentives for organizations to provide post-licensure training, support, and simulation labs, but that should come with a standardization and a plan. We'd like state funding or supplementary incentive for nurse retention. And then we'd like to see a menu of incentives for preceptors. These could include student loan forgiveness, tax credit, tuition assistance for dependents, low APR loans for housing or vehicles, and they could choose from that menu versus just having one. We'd like to fund a statewide common platform to schedule the student clinical experiences that also housed their requirements for students. So many times we talked about the barriers that training organizations would use multiple training sites available in their cities or in their regions. But when those come with different regulations, it's so difficult to get a student to have a TB skin test here, but they have to be fit tested here and different regulations based on the clinical site. It just becomes easier to just not even put them in those additional training sites. So if we had a common requirement and then a common database, we would do it once and then a student could go anywhere. Starting at the junior high and high school level, preparing students for college and incorporate, quote, pre-nursing training into prerequisites. These could include ESL, literacy, life skills, wraparound services, the ability to work under stress and uncertainty, professionalism, critical thinking, and organization skills. And finally, creating a statewide consortium between state, academia, and hospital and other large employers to develop programming tools and to disseminate this information. So our policy group did a lot of work, had a lot of recommendations, but at the same time that we were meeting, there was also a policy work group 3, and they were to look at challenges and effective strategies to expand education and training opportunities for allied health professionals. So I'll read quickly through some of their recommendations. First of all, they looked at the work setting, and they came away with the consensus statements that significant emotional and physical impact and demands of the profession, the work setting should look into those. There's a need for physical and psychological safety as well as feeling valued. There needs to be importance placed on work-life balance and flexibility in scheduling. Employers need to evaluate and address the needs of healthcare workers. There is an importance of having appropriate staffing to avoid burnout and shortages. There are issues with compliance and accountability around hospital staffing committees. And finally, there's concerns about mandated staffing ratios. They also touched on an area of data, and data needed to finish looking at allied health training, and that is the lack of comprehensive data on workforce trends, retention, and reasons for leaving the industry. Data is siloed across different entities and licensing bodies, and there's missing demographic and employment data for some of the professions. And then finally, we just want to touch briefly on the wonderful presentations that we listened to the morning before our work groups in the afternoon. There were many recommendations from these presentations that we incorporated into our work groups through the afternoon, but I'll just reiterate a few of them. The Teaching Hospitals of Texas, everyone supported the funding of Senate Bill 25, which would allow clinical site nurse preceptor grants, clinical site innovation and coordination grants, and nurse faculty grant programs for part-time and clinical training. The Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council Foundation had a number of recommendations that you saw come out in our work groups, and that included standardizing immunization requirements, basically standardizing everything for a nursing student, streamlining the onboarding process, considering clinical rotations on nights and weekends, competency-based versus hour requirements for clinicals, dedicated education units, et cetera. The Texas Association for Home Care certainly recommended having students in the home care, but that's where the questions of legality came up. So when those questions are addressed, again, we'd like to see that information streamlined and standardized across the state. And then the SNAPPy program, which was the Shared Nurse Academic Practice Partnership, we thought that that was fascinating and really developed a great model where you shared faculty, but that was in a very localized area of the state. And we recommended funding and work to be done to streamline that around the state. And then finally, the Rural Nurse Education Consortium. That was a model that was done up in Moore County where the training institutions couldn't find faculty. So the hospital is the one that provided the faculty, and it became a relationship between the training institution and the hospital. We felt that that was a great solution, not just for the rurals, but certainly for the rural areas, but that again, needed to be funded and rolled out throughout the state. So that was the end of our day. We had a great participation amongst all of our stakeholders. We're happy to take any questions, but we feel like we've put a lot of detail in our slides that you can have available to you.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent presentation. Any questions from the panel? And I want to welcome Jennifer Deegan for joining us today. Thank you both very, very much for all your work on this and for agreeing to be co-chairs for the workshops.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
was fun. We appreciate it.
Okay, next we're going to hear a couple of panels on the issue related to K-12 and particularly in the allied healthcare professional space. We learned that a lot of the high schools are preparing a lot of these allied healthcare professional roles, and there were kind of concerns both sides of that issue, whether those programs were really in the spot that they needed to be in. So I asked Texas Education Agency to come in and talk to us about their process. Come on up, Monica. That'll be Monica Martinez, the Associate Commissioner of Standards and Programs. And then we'll also hear from Dusty Moore, who is with a group that also works in this space. So come on up, Dusty. Yeah, you can come on up. And so we're just going to take a minute and learn a little bit more about how the K-12 piece of this works for preparation of mostly allied healthcare professionals, but there are nursing programs in this state as well. So Monica, go ahead, and thank you both for being here today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to attempt to provide a little bit of an overview of some of the processes that we use in K-12 education that are specific to career and technical education and the healthcare workforce. So just to begin, we do have a lot of our work that resides under the authority of the elected State Board of Education. The State Board is required to identify the scope of review for all of our grade levels and subjects. So they establish the standards for what students should know and be able to do in every course and every subject. That includes career and technical education. And they are required to get input from a variety of stakeholders, including educators, parents, in the case of CTE, employers, and other constituents. And so as they go through and periodically review the standards that are in place and revise those standards, they do bring in a variety of stakeholders to make those recommendations. This is not something that I would expect you to read. I've got a few blow up slides, but just to give you an idea, the board started with review and revision of the foundation subject areas, English, math, science, social studies. And as they started thinking about career and technical education, they recognized that there were some important differences and that they needed to have a slightly different process to make sure they were engaging the right stakeholders in the review and revision of those courses. So they have a process they use for all other subject areas and then a process that they use for career and technical education. That process, as an overview, includes soliciting applications from subject matter experts. So this is not just educators, but anyone who would have the knowledge of what students should know and be able to do. They then have to approve those applications. Any approved applications come over to where we then build what we call work groups who make recommendations and support the board throughout their process. So to give you a little bit more detail, it's a very detailed process. They do begin with some initial steps that include collecting survey information from individuals on existing coursework to try to get a sense of where we might need to make updates, where we might need new courses, where we might want to eliminate courses. We do some of that through our regional education service centers who are able to convene groups locally to try to engage more constituents throughout the state in the process. And so a few things that we wanted to highlight here, that there are lots of opportunities for input and feedback as the board goes through that process. With CTE in particular, part of what they have started doing, we've got at this point close to 400 career and technical education courses in the state, a lot of courses, and they recognize that trying to look at that many courses all at once wasn't doing justice to any of them. And so now they cycle through, and we typically will look at courses that are within a specific career cluster, or so a related set of courses, or more specifically within a program of study. And I'll talk a little bit about those in just a moment. So then once we have those work groups established, the board determines what their charge is. It could be very minor revisions to wholesale revisions or development of new courses. And so we do bring groups in to take a look at the standards, and they work on making recommendations. Those meetings typically will be 2 to 3 days at a time, and we will have folks convene for 2 or 3 meetings before anything goes back to the State Board of Education. We then take those drafts. Every draft that is developed gets published on the TEA website, and anyone can go at any time and take a look at those standards and make recommendations for additional adjustments or changes. And we've been very fortunate that oftentimes we will get very specific feedback. We have really been focused with CTE in trying to solicit input from employers, from those who are working in the field to make sure that we are keeping up with the needs of the workforce in those recommendations. So we take all of those recommendations and we provide them back to the work groups. We also, at the beginning of the process, will conduct stakeholder engagement sessions, because we discovered a lot of folks who would be interested, who would have beneficial knowledge, don't necessarily have a good enough understanding about when and how to engage. And so one of the things that we're always looking for help, we've really reached out to our tri-agency partners at the Higher Education Coordinating Board, at the Workforce Commission, to identify the groups who would have the right knowledge and expertise that we can invite to learn more about the process, who we hope will then engage and provide that feedback as we move through. We then move on to putting those recommendations in the hands of the State Board of Education. Their process is such that they will consider an item, and all of these standards live in our administrative rules, have to go through that process. But they always start with a discussion. So we provide them with a draft recommendation. They don't take any action. They just tell us what they think. They'll either tell us that the work groups are on target, they might want minor changes, or sometimes they send them back to the drawing board. During that discussion phase, we're also collecting additional feedback from members of the community. We will reconvene those work groups for whatever number of meetings it takes to get a final set of recommendations in place. Also at that discussion phase, they do hold a public hearing where they invite members of the public to come in and provide testimony to them about additional changes that they might recommend for those standards. We then move on to the last couple of phases in the process, which is the State Board of Education rulemaking action. That begins with a second public hearing. They then conduct what we call first reading and filing authorization. This is where they give the agency permission to file a proposed set of rules for the official public comment period. So even though we've solicited input and comment throughout the period, there's that last opportunity for that official comment, 30-day window at least, in between meetings. We come back with that comment. They might make additional amendments based on the comments that they receive, and then they adopt the standards as final. They then also make a decision about when those standards will be implemented. So typically, everything that we implement is going to start with a new school year. But when we're making changes like this to coursework, we will typically give school districts a couple of years of advance notice so that they can adjust curriculum, so that the board can call for instructional materials. They can get teachers trained if they need to, if there's a shift, and then they'll implement those new standards, usually about 2 years after adoption. So that is the State Board of Education's process. Wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what results from that process. So we currently have 5 approved statewide programs of study that are related to our health science career cluster. And within those programs of study, and I apologize that this is teeny tiny little font, but was trying to keep the slides to a minimum, 58 courses that currently exist related to health science. And then those courses are organized into the different programs of study so that a student would work through from a broader, more general introductory course in an area like health science, where they get more specific as they move through their program of study, and where we see the rigor increase in the types of courses that they would complete. We are trying to balance providing some amount of flexibility, recognizing that we have a lot of students who will transfer from one school to another throughout the state. Recognizing that we're talking about high school students who in ninth grade, 14, 15 years old, may think that they're interested in nursing and then may decide that, you know, they don't really like the sight of blood and they need to make a shift, and maybe they discover that they're interested in pursuing something that is adjacent or something that is a completely different program of study. And so there are some opportunities for students to make some shifts. They're not necessarily going to be pigeonholed into that one program of study to the greatest extent possible. We also recognize, however, that if we have courses that are too broad in general, then students are not going to get the level of instruction that they need in order to have that meaningful program of study that would lead them to a career, to additional study in higher education that is specifically related. And so trying to strike that balance, you'll see we, for biomedical science, have 3 what we call level 1 courses that students can choose from, 3 level 2, and then there are more options as you move on to level 3 and level 4 because the courses start to get much more specific. Here's another program of study. So this is our nursing science programs of study, where you can see now there are 2 different courses that a student might start with that set of principles courses. And then they would go into more specific courses in level 3 and level 4. You'll notice that we have several courses that are called practicum courses. This is where we really get into the work-based learning. So we're, by the time students get to level 3 and level 4, it should be much more hands-on instruction. So they shouldn't be just sitting in a classroom reading out of a textbook. They should actually be practicing the things that they are learning within these different, whether it is an off-site work-based learning opportunity, or even many of our campuses now have much more sophisticated labs within their schools to be able to give students that very practical experience. Another area that we've been working on to try to make sure that we have a good sense of how well prepared our students are for those next steps is that we do have a list of industry-based certifications that we use in the high school setting, and we work very closely with our tri-agency partners again on some of these areas. We are in the process of making a shift where districts get credit for students who are determined to be college, career, military ready. Then a district gets credit in the state accountability system for preparing that student for those next steps. We are now in the process of making a shift where, in order for a student to be deemed career ready based on completion of a program of study, they have to also successfully earn an aligned industry-based certification. These are certifications that a student should be able to earn by the time that the summer after their senior year is complete. So I might be working toward a certain industry-based certification. I might need a certain number of hours to sit for a test, or maybe I need to be 18 years of age. So we do give students through the end of the summer in the event that they need that additional time. But everything that we have on our list is something that a high school student should be able to earn. So you'll notice, for example, and these are from the 22-23 school year, from those that were the highest earned on down. And you'll see, for example, we've got almost 2,500 students who earned a CNA in the 22-23 school year. That then gives them the opportunity to leverage that, whether they're going on to higher education. Maybe in some of these, you'll see they could potentially get a job in one of these fields while they're going on to pursue other education and training post high school. I was also asked to talk a little bit about the qualifications for our high school educators. And so again, apologies that there's a lot of small text on these slides. So the certification of K-12 teachers is under the responsibility of the State Board for Educator Certification. That board then takes all of their recommendations that go into administrative rule. They have to be also approved by the State Board of Education. So that's a two-step process. But in order to be assigned to teach in a K-12 high school, there are certain things that have to be true. An educator has to have a teacher certification in a certain area. And then there are oftentimes additional training requirements, especially when we're talking about something like career and technical education. We want to make sure that they have some of that practical experience. So they oftentimes will have other certifications related to the area of subject matter expertise. And then we have in, again, administrative rule, what we call the, excuse me, personnel assignments. And this is actually specific to the set of courses. And so you'll see here, for example, in order for an individual to teach anatomy and physiology, medical microbiology, you'll see the rest of the list there, then there are 12 different teaching certificates that that individual might possess that would enable them to teach that course. Again, trying to strike the balance, recognizing that oftentimes school districts struggle to find individuals who have the right training and expertise, who are also willing to go into a Texas classroom. A lot of times, especially in fields like those you're discussing today, somebody can go and make a lot more money and possibly work fewer hours in a different field. And so trying to get the right individuals employed in the campus to be able to teach these courses at times can be a struggle, especially if you think about your small rural school districts. And so the SBEC, like the SBOE, has tried to build in enough flexibility while also ensuring that an individual possesses the right knowledge and skills to be able to teach those students. You'll see at the very bottom of this slide, sometimes what we will do is we will also require additional training, recognizing that oftentimes we do have individuals who are coming from a different career into teaching, and it's not enough just to have the subject matter expertise. They need to have an understanding of the pedagogy, classroom management in order to be successful. And so we will provide additional training, oftentimes free of charge, to help individuals to gain those skills that they would need to successfully provide instruction in a K-12 classroom. Lastly, wanted to share a few resources. This is a graphic from one of our recent statewide annual reports that attempts to show how all of these pieces work together. So I mentioned we've got the different career clusters that are a higher level grouping of courses that lead to programs of study that are aligned to a certain high school course sequence that then result in an industry-based certification. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the areas where the state has invested in CTE more broadly over the last few years. As I mentioned, districts get credit for getting students successfully through these programs in the A through F accountability system. There is what we call an outcomes bonus. So again, students who are passing those industry-based certifications, districts get an additional little bump in funding that can be used then to further support these programs. We also recently saw the legislature make a shift in the additional funding. So we have what is called weighted funding, additional funding over what districts get for general student attendance for certain areas. One of them is career and technical education, recognizing that these programs are often much more expensive to implement. The legislature, I think it was 2 sessions ago, made a shift to try to create additional incentive for those higher level courses. So they get the most funding for students who successfully complete level 3 and level 4 courses, so that we're getting them through that program of study. They get the next highest amount for level 1, level 2, and then they do get a small bump, but not as much for courses that are not specifically related to the programs of study. So trying to make sure that everything that we're doing is supporting these very coherent and meaningful programs. We also have P-TECH academies, which are specifically focused on getting students through these career-focused areas. There's a lot more support for the work-based learning, incentives for trying to get different organizations, companies to agree to give these students preference in hiring if they are engaged in work-based learning through that partnership. So trying to provide some of those incentives, not only for us to prepare students with the right skills, but for students to see something more meaningful when they graduate high school. There's also the JET grant funding that is out of the Texas Workforce Commission, but that is eligible not only to post-secondary, but also secondary schools. Then we've got a variety of other regional programs. We've got something that we call the Texas Regional Pathways Network that is an initiative to engage members of the business community with higher education in K-12 to ensure that there are those meaningful relationships within regions to support workforce needs.
Monica, before you go on,
Yes, ma'am.
does TA have kind of a little map maybe that shows us where these programs are kind of distributed across the state?
We do, and I'm happy to send that to you. We've actually
Great.
got a couple of things. We've got a heat map that shows, so if you were interested in certain programs of study, it'll show you where in the state those are located.
Okay,
We've also got a map of where we have the Texas Regional Pathways partnerships,
perfect.
and happy to provide that information.
Thank you.
And I believe lastly, this is an example of some of the kinds of resources that we make available. So we have what we call frameworks related to each one of our programs of study. And this shows you at a glance, again, all of those courses that I listed. So a student, so this is something that a student and a parent could look at to see, if I'm interested in nursing, what kinds of courses might I take in high school? Level 1, 2, 3, and 4. We provide information on the related industry-based certifications. We also provide examples of what comes next. So we're trying to really focus on multiple on and off ramps. So maybe right now I think I want to go straight into employment, but I decide in a couple of years that I need more education. Then I would know where I would be able to re-enter, whether it's a 2-year college or try to shift and go to a 4-year university. So showing those different opportunities. And then we show some median wage data to help students understand, because there's sometimes a disconnect between what they would, the earning potential and the preparation that they have. And then we provide them with examples of the numbers of jobs that they could expect to see. So, there's something that they might see on TV that looks interesting, forensic science, maybe they think they want to go into something very specialized that they saw, but there might be fewer than 100 jobs expected in that particular area. So really trying to help ground students in what can they expect to make, how many job opportunities might there be. We've really tried to emphasize areas of need here in Texas. And then the next couple of pages just show, again, some of the different coursework options so that if they're looking to potentially make a shift because maybe that first option of a pathway wasn't quite the right fit, then it shows them where they might be able to apply their courses they've already taken, potentially to pursue a slightly new program of study. And I think that's what I've got. I'm happy to stop and try and answer any questions.
Thank you so much. This is a very good presentation and exactly what I was hoping for. So I really appreciate that. My question, variability in quality across the state and across districts. How does TEA try to sort of get into that space? And because I think that's what we heard. We heard from certain people in certain parts of the state that these programs were not always great. And then we heard from other people that they were great. So how does TEA try to mitigate that variation?
That's a really good question. And one of the challenges that we face is we are a very big state, over 1,200 school districts, and TEA doesn't always have the authority to monitor in the ways that I think folks might prefer. So one of the ways that we have tried to really think about some of that quality is with that link between the program of study and an industry-based certification. And we've got a pretty rigorous process for the industry-based certifications that make it onto our list for purposes of K-12 education. There's a set of 6 criteria that a certification would have to meet in order for it to go on the list. And so the idea is that it shouldn't just be, we're talking about certifications, not a certificate that I might, sit in my garage and say, I'm going to put you through this Microsoft Word course, and then you get the certificate after, and this is a meaningful credential when maybe no employers would recognize that. And so trying to make sure that anything we have on our list is industry recognized and that would be meaningful for students, and that it's not just enough to complete a set of courses, but they need to demonstrate the knowledge that they've acquired through that IBC. So that's one of the ways that we have tried to account for quality in those programs, is really trying to make sure that there's something at the end that isn't just, I sat through 4 high school courses and, a grade I might get in one. Everyone knows every classroom might be a little bit different and teachers grade differently. And so trying to make sure that there's another way to determine what those students know and are able to do. And then there are other incentives for, as I mentioned, like the outcomes-based funding, some of those things, so that there are a variety of carrots to increase the quality and the rigor of programs wherever possible.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the panel? Great. Thank you so much, Monica. Next up is Woody. Where did it go? Yeah, Dusty Moore. Thank you.
Good morning. So it's tough act to follow here, but I do feel good having Monica here because anything that I say wrong, she can just correct me on the spot. But great to be here with you today. I'm Dusty Moore. I'm CEO of ICEV. We are a company based out of Lubbock, Texas. We've been there for 40 years, and we serve CTE programs. We serve about 4,500 CTE programs across the country, both secondary and post-secondary, in a variety of ways. But the 3 main is, number 1, instructional materials. So we have about 200 online courses ranging from health science to agriculture science to STEM to law across all 16 different clusters. And by online instructional materials, I mean, we don't have online courses where students sit in front of a computer. We have online materials that teachers then utilize to guide them through as they go through and do the instruction. Number 2 is we test for industry-based certifications on our platform as well. We have about 19 different industry certs that we test for currently, none right now in the health science area, but we do the testing for different industry certifications. And then number 3 is we do data and analytics for CTE programs. So when you look at CTE programs and work-based learning, CTSOs, concentrators, completer status, there's a lot of data that goes around making sure you've got a 360-degree view of your CTE program to where it is of the quality that we need to build out the workforce. And we provide the data and analytics there. And a lot of what I'm going to say in my presentation is a repeat of what Monica said, but I pulled some stats just for us to kind of take a look at. And this came from the 21-22 Perkins data, but about 1.8 million secondary CTE participants in Texas. And what a participant is they're somebody they are taking a CTE class. So they're involved, they're taking a CTE class. But the next slide shows concentrators, and concentrators is what we're after, because what that's doing is that's moving students along that program of study that Monica just talked about, and in getting them into more specialized fields to where they do earn the industry-based certifications, they're participating in the work-based learning opportunities, and they're actively going out and into that career. And so you can see that health science does a great job in regards to this, that 22.88% of the secondary CTE concentrators in Texas were in that health science cluster area. And so, and actually with the program of study refresh, so there were programs of study that were implemented in 2019, and then the new refresh that are available this school year. Through our data and analytics tool, I think we estimated that there would be a 10% increase in the concentrators statistic, which is great. It shows that flexibility that Monica was just talking about. But what we want to do is move the needle on concentrators and completers, because that's getting students more ready for the workforce. We also took PEIMS data, and I think this is from 22 and 23, and took a look at the number of CTE courses offered per district. And so you'll see that the far left, that's how many districts just had maybe one CTE course, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And so it's really interesting when you look at that, because again, what we want to do is move the needle to the right. We want, secondary programs to be able to offer more health science courses and more in that program of study. And a big reason for that is you'll see the top 10 enrolled health science courses up there, anatomy and physiology. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Monica, but that does count for that fourth science credit, correct? Third or fourth science credit. And so that's where you see a lot of those one programs come in, is that A&P course. The great news on that is there's a foundation to build from. And so if we're teaching those classes and we're starting in those different health science classes, how do we add to it and add more? Next slide here. Oh, and I'll just briefly cover this, but I was going to give a shout out to TEA on this slide, because what they've put together for the programs of study are fantastic for school districts, for counselors and guidance advisors, for parents. I have two 14-year-olds that, as a proud dad moment, they're doing their first career and technical student trip today. And so they're involved in their CTE program. But when we were going through and looking at courses and course options and students developing four-year plans, this was what was an asset that we had available to us to look at. And so great job by TEA by putting out, here's all the courses, here are the outcomes that we're looking for, and here's what's out there for you as a student as you go through your high school career. We did a study recently with a company called Catapult X, and that's kind of how I'm up here in front of you today. And it was a national study based off of the healthcare worker shortage and looking at CTE programs across the country. I think number one, 2 points on this slide, and I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but number one is that CTE works. And so you'll see down there in the improved professional success, a study that was done that shows that CTE students that are concentrators or completers go on to a full-time employment, and that they are moved along into that career path of their choosing. CTE prepares those students for those fields. I think the other interesting thing is we look at the right side, and I was kind of comparing this with Monica's data from Texas. This is national and a national survey, and you can see where the nursing assistant certification is the top one on the list. And you can see all the different ones. And again, I think that's another asset that Texas has, is when you look at the A to F accountability list for certifications, there is a wide range of certifications on there to fit the labor needs. And so again, TEA through that process has done a very good job of looking at the labor demands, making sure that the certifications that are on the list are a credential of value for that student. And so whenever you look at some other states, those lists can be a little bit limiting, narrowing into one different career area. Texas does a good job of opening it up and looking at the different labor force within that health science career field. So I thought those stats compared to the stats from Texas were pretty interesting. When you look at the challenges that CTE programs face, and Monica mentioned this earlier, hiring and retaining teachers is the number one challenge. To have a great CTE teacher, they need that industry expertise, but then they also have to understand the pedagogy and how to actually go about teaching that to students. And again, when we look at CTE, they are doing in-classroom experiences. They are doing HOSA, the CTSO for health science. They're participating in those activities. They're helping coordinate work-based learning opportunities. There is a lot involved for a CTE teacher. And so jumping from a health science industry setting into the classroom can be a daunting task. Everybody always brings up the wage difference, and you can't get past that. But I think there are a few other supports that we can put in place to maybe possibly help those health science professionals that jump in to the classroom to train the next area of health science teachers. I'll just skip past that one. So this one right here has the educator voices. And so I think some of this explains what I just said, that basically some of the challenges for teaching CTEs, keeping curriculum up to date. It's looking at all the different areas in regards to the CTSOs, the work-based learning, et cetera. We're pulling folks in a lot of different directions. And so how can we put some policies in place to support those folks? I think one of the things, and I'm wrapping up here pretty quickly, but with the passage of HB 1605 and the high quality instructional materials review, I think that allows us to look at CTE in a different scope and look at it from a larger program of study scope, like what Monica was talking about earlier. And so when we look at how courses scaffold on top of each other from the standpoint that if I'm taking principles of health science as a freshman, and then I'm taking the next level course and the next level course and the next level course, how do we scaffold that properly to get to the outcome that we're looking for? And we, as people that make instructional materials, we should prove in our materials that we can go forth and build it out to where it gives that student a better chance of getting the outcome that we're looking for, which is that industry-based certification and then jumping into the workforce. And so as we look at this new HQIM material process, and the first process is currently in motion, but how do we prioritize some CTE programs of study, especially those in the health science area that fit with the labor shortage? So let's look at those different programs of study and say, where's the shortage at the most? And then let's try to prioritize that in that HQIM process. And then I had also mentioned conduct that HQIM process for the entire program of study in one cycle. Again, because that allows us to scaffold it appropriately to hit that outcome that we're looking for. And then the other thing too is Monica mentioned this, that there were 50 different, 50 different health science courses. That's a lot for any one group to look at one time to make sure that the TEKs are right, the materials are right, et cetera. And so as we work through that cycle, current health science programs are supported through the instructional materials allotment. And back in 2017, there was an instructional materials adoption for a wide range of health science courses. A lot of districts buy that for say 8 years, and that 8-year cycle is coming to an end here in 2025. So until we can go through that HQIM process, making sure that the IMA is fully funded to where districts can get the health science supports that they need to implement those different program areas. Next up, and Monica mentioned the Jobs in Education for Texans grant program. So we travel across the state and talk to CTE directors everywhere, and they love this grant program. A lot of folks are looking at how they can implement new health science programs in their school district, and this is a great resource for that. So whenever you look at, I was reading this morning, kind of going back through to see different school districts, but Arlington ISD getting a grant to implement more health science programs to lead to different certifications. Sinton ISD doing the same thing. Like it goes rural, urban, it really is fitting that need. And what I did, they have a really cool tool on their website, on Texas Workforce Commission's website, that you can go through, and it's a Power BI deal to where you can choose the occupations and how it was supported through the grant. And so any way we can look at the Jobs in Education for Texans grant program and expanding that, or possibly just creating a new one for health science programs. A CTE director I talked to the other day, she was looking at implementing a few new health science courses. It's average about $130,000 capital expenditure to get the equipment and supplies necessary for her to go through and do that and offer that program. These types of grant programs really do wonders in expanding those programs and giving school districts an opportunity to do more with their CTE programs. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much. That worked together really well. Filled in a lot of the gaps and some of the things that we heard in the workshop. So thank you both very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you both very much. We're going to move on and hear from a couple of our workforce partners to talk about a couple of those local approaches. We're going to start with Dr. Sandra Woodley. She is virtual, coming to us from UT Permian Basin, and they have a great data management system and some other things that they do out there that we wanted to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit about the situation out here in the Permian Basin, and then I'll share a few slides. One of the things that we know about the Permian Basin is just the intensity.
Christine, you're turning it up.
Can you hear me?
I think you're fine. I think it's on our end. Yeah.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready.
Are you working on volume? Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Keep talking.
Okay, testing, testing. Hello?
Okay.
Okay. Let me know if that works.
That's a little better. Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you
Let's
very
go with
much.
that and see if we can keep improving.
Okay,
thank
thank you. I'll use my outside voice. So the Permian Basin, you know, one of the things that,
We
you
do
know, we're
recommend you get a
working-
little closer to your microphone, Sandra, if that's possible.
Well, let's see, I don't. My microphone is in my computer, so I think it's all the way up.
We can hear her very well online, so I'm not sure if it's audio in the room, but online we can hear you very well, Sandra.
Okay. All right,
Let's go ahead and
so
go. Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead. You know, the economic activity here for the oil and gas industry is really huge for us. And of course, it fuels the funding for the entire state. We know that, you know, making sure that we have the workforce in the Permian Basin is paramount, and we're working on ways that we can facilitate that. Let me just share a few slides here. So our university serves about 7,500 students in the Permian Basin. Most of our students are first-generation students, Hispanic serving institution, trying to find their way into the workforce here. You know, one of the things that we learned recently through the Perryman report was over the next 2 decades, we will need almost 200,000 more workers in our workforce. And of those 200,000 workers, about 38,000 of them will require at least a baccalaureate degree. That really is a steep climb for us out here in the Permian Basin to achieve. You know, our university really focuses on these main areas. And here today, we're here to talk about healthcare. So I'll zero in on mental health and also other healthcare opportunities for us. You know, the Perryman report showed that about a quarter of all the jobs in the Permian Basin were linked either directly or indirectly to our university. So we're really an important part of grow your own out here in the university, out here in the Permian Basin. One of the challenges that we serve here is it's not particularly high population for the
Sandra,
number of
if you had
jobs that
slides,
are
they're
available.
not being
So-
shared. Do you have the slides and do you have the ability to pull those up?
Is it not sharing?
No, ma'am.
Well, it's showing them on my screen. I don't know how. Let's see, start from the beginning. What about that?
No, ma'am.
Well, it shows that it's sharing, so. Well, I don't know what to do.
Okay, then we'll pull them up on our end. Okay. Okay, we've got them up now.
Okay, well, will I be able to see them?
You should.
All right, let me end the show here for me. All right, now I can see them.
Okay, great. And what slide would you like to be on?
Go to the work, keep scrolling and then I'll show you.
Okay.
Keep scrolling. Yeah, let's stop right here. So part of the challenge that we have, of course, is that the population centers are in other areas of the state, not here in the Permian Basin. And so the ability for us to grow our own, those students who will stay and work in the Permian Basin, really is our strategy here at UT Permian Basin. Next slide. You know, we have investments from the Permian Strategic Partnership and other foundations in growing our healthcare programs. So we received more than $20 million in areas that are specifically targeted to the next generation of health professionals in conjunction with our friends at Texas Tech Health Science Center. So the Permian Strategic Partnership invested both in Texas Tech Health Science Center and UTPB to grow nursing. For us, it's the pre-med, pre-health programs that fold directly into Texas Tech Health Science Center medicine programs. Next slide. The other area is, really these behavioral health programs as well. We have a new behavioral health facility that's going on out there. We're working really hard to make sure that we have counselors, and PSP and the Scarborough Foundation invested more than $10 million in UTPB to really ramp up those programs. They provided, scholarship dollars. They provided, recruiting and marketing dollars. They provided startup costs for our faculty lines in other areas to be able to really ramp that up. So next slide. Scroll to the next one. Next one. So what we're working on here is a prototype of a workforce insights solution with SAS Analytics. SAS Analytics is a major analytics platform and company that will help bring data from many different source categories into a data warehouse, create a structural model, and then to help us to create reports and analytical models and dashboards for all of the decision makers who can make a difference. And I'll just talk a little bit about what the objectives of this analytics project would be. The first thing, of course, is we need to have a model that can track the workforce gaps for the Permian Basin and then develop executive dashboards for all of the decision makers to be able to fill that gap and to track our progress over time. The second one is to provide analysis and briefings to professionals in our economic development areas here, industry leaders, and educational leaders to support those efforts to close the gap. The third objective is eventually to connect all of these data sources, not only for the workforce gaps, but to connect it to the students who are in the pipeline in all of the educational institutions. That's UTPB, that's Texas Tech Health Science Center, that's both of our community colleges, so that we know who's in the pipeline taking these courses that can eventually have the credentials needed in the workforce. And then the next phase would be to connect that to the K-12 data. I was interested in watching the reports earlier from your other presenters that show all of these certifications and all of these ways that we could really look at who is in the K-12 system who are interested in healthcare professionals. Then could we, as the higher ed entities, go out and get additional support like we did from PSP and others to create marketing campaigns and scholarships and ways for us to recruit those students in the Permian Basin to go to school here and to graduate with the credentials and fill into the workforce. And the last objective of this model really is to pull together a comprehensive, collaborative regional workforce planning commission, for lack of a better word. If we have all of the data in these models and they're connected, everybody has the information that they need to understand their role in filling that gap. And then we can coordinate on programs between and among the educational entities and really work to reach back into the K-12 and the community college system to be able to persuade and provide support for students who are interested in going into those really high demand and shortage areas, particularly for us in healthcare here in the Permian Basin. Next slide. This just really shows how the data sharing can come from so many different institutions and can flow into the advanced analytics program that we would house here at UT Permian Basin, have the resource, the research collaboration in there, and then provide that as a service to everyone who needs that information to be able to serve their role. Second, last slide, I think here is, just another way of looking at what the typical data sources that can be brought into this model, what maybe some additional data sources could feed into it as well. And then to have that regional workforce model that could really pay a service to all of those who are in the Permian Basin. And if you'll stop sharing the slide, I can just wrap up really quick. So, I think for us, this isn't a prototype situation. We have some of the data ready. We're working on funding to be able to create this regional workforce solution to share. And we hope to get it off the ground soon in the next year or so and provide this collaborative opportunity to really get very specific about the evidence and the data that we need to be able to understand the scope of our work, how our work is going, and to debrief with those who are working on that over the coming years. And so I'll stop there and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And this is another one of the different kinds of collaborations we have heard of from all the corners of the state, frankly. And they all come from different perspectives and have different approaches. So thank you for this. We're going to hear one more. That's next is the Workforce Solutions Capital Area and Central Texas Health Partnership. Ashley King is their Director of Healthcare Partnerships. So this one's right here close to home.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley King. I'm the Director of Healthcare Partnerships at Workforce Solutions Capital Area, and we have our Central Texas Healthcare Partnership. We have 5 industry sector partnerships at Workforce Solutions, and healthcare is one of those. Our industry sector partnership is led by industry. That's how we designed it. It was intentionally designed to be led by our hospital systems, but then we also work in education and our community organizations as well. And we have 4 focus areas that we work on through the Central Texas Healthcare Partnership. One of those is our K-12 sector. We work on nursing, severe shortage careers, and clinical placements. And I know that everyone's going to say, isn't nursing a severe shortage area? Yes, it is. We do hope to someday solve nursing, but our severe shortages, it is easier to move the needle. So we're hoping to work on those, solve them, move on to other severe shortages in healthcare. Nursing, we kind of anticipate that we're going to be working on that one for a while. And then obviously clinical placements. I don't think it's going to come as a shock to anyone that clinical placements is the major barrier to growing our health science programs. So specific to nursing here in Austin, we do clinical placements for over 2,500 students between our LVN, ADN, and BSN programs. That equates to over 11,000 rotations and 637,000 hours that these students are trained in the facilities. We do have a centralized clinical placement software system that we use for 2 of our 3 hospitals here in the Austin region, and it's called Clinical Student. Even though our 3rd hospital system, Baylor Scott & White, they have a centralized clinical placement system for all of their hospitals in the state. However, we still work with them to work on compliance alignment so that all of our schools are having the same requirements for their students so they don't have to get, CPR trained with one system from a specific provider, and then the others have to have it. So they don't need double training. They can do it all. And we align that through the Central Texas Healthcare Partnership. Clinical placements, we know it's a huge barrier to growth. The first thing we did when we started working on this was looking at a culture shift. So for the students, having them to stop thinking about, I need to finish this clinical rotation so I can go to the next one, and have them thinking about, is this somewhere that I could see myself working? Is this a unit I'm interested in working in? Is this the coworkers that I want to work with? And from the hospital system, have them stop thinking about, I have another round of nursing students coming in this week, and then another, and then another, and another, and have them think about it as, I'm picking my next coworker. I want the best of the best. I want them to be trained well because I want this student working with me long-term. The next thing we did was went to our hospital systems. We knew we could not grow clinical placements without their help. And so we looked at our unit parameters, and were there opportunities to increase on units where we could add additional students, and were there units that were not being utilized for clinical placements that would be a good experience for these students. And so through those efforts, most of our hospital systems did increase units, they added units, and then we were able to add additional students. The other thing that we did was look at baseline data. So we knew that if we were going to make a difference, I needed baseline data so that I could prove that it was working. And so we really took a look at that when we first started the program. The next thing that we added were mandatory rosters. And so for every single request going into the system, we wanted to know exactly which students were going to be on those units. We added those in 2020 with the new clinical placement software system. And what we quickly learned is that every single school was over requesting placements. And when I say over requesting placements, of all of the clinical placements that were approved by the hospitals, 40% of them were not being used. It was a huge number that we had no idea, and it created additional space that we didn't know that we had. So then we took a community approach. It's a common goal that all of our healthcare systems could go around, was clinical placements. It's something they're all working on. So our schools are also all working on it. And so how do we create that cohesiveness? We have a unit availability access system. So if I have one hospital that is not able to provide a request, I can go to our other hospital system and see all of the units that are available and say, we can't place you here, but I do have this available at this other facility that is a similar unit. We also had a growth mindset. The one thing that we all agreed on is that we wanted to increase nursing graduates in the Austin region. So through that, we created this strategic implementation for new programs. I am not in the business of telling any school how to run their program, but if I can tell you, if you want to do OB and pediatric placements, I have much better clinical placements to offer you in the spring than I do in the fall. So when we have new nursing programs that are coming in, when they meet with the hospitals to get approval so that they can put it on their board of nursing application that they have clinical placements, before they will sign that, they will meet with me so that we can talk about what clinical placements look like in the region. So that they can already from the very start be looking at overnight clinicals, know that evening and weekend clinicals are going to be a priority. And then they also look at simulation as a requirement. And then I'll tell them, depending on how you want to set up your program, these are kind of the barrier placements that we have. Usually pediatric and OB are at the top of the list. And these are where I would recommend you put them in your program. You can put them wherever you like, but I have more clinical placements for those in the spring than I do in the fall. So looking at a strategic viewpoint for that. Also, we are working on evening, weekends, and overnight clinicals. Overnight clinicals are wildly unpopular and no one really wants them, but I have a wide availability for them. And so we are already letting our programs know, plan for it, be at the forefront of this, because then you get first pick of what is available, what is there. I can give you whatever you like at this current moment for your clinicals if you can do overnights. Also working with the hospital systems to work on that faculty piece. That's always usually the barrier we hear, is that we can't find faculty to do overnights. So actually some of our hospital systems are looking at, could we potentially provide the faculty, and then that's available and then you just utilize those clinical placements. So looking at some innovation. We have had 4 new nursing programs come on here in Austin in the last 4 years, and we have 3 more on the horizon. Part of that community approach that we work with, we have a monthly clinical placement opportunities meeting with all of our nursing programs and hospitals to look at new opportunities, to look at that community approach. What that has done is that they're very well aware of who the clinical coordinators are at all of the programs. There's that community, they're all working together towards this goal. They share pain points for sure. And so that's kind of that really good camaraderie that they have. And so if they do have a conflict, they can call up the person who is in the conflict with the school and say, hey, Mary, I know that you guys are here. Would it be okay if we started one day earlier? Do you guys have that flexibility? And so those conversations happen very organically because of those meetings. We also have our quarterly nursing academic practice and partnership meeting, and that is with all of the deans and directors from our nursing programs, as well as the hospitals. And the key focus for those meetings is growth. How do we make that happen? How do we increase enrollment? What are the barriers to that? And how can we work together to solve them? So clinical placements, we also work on simulation usage. We are big on that because we know the more schools that we have doing simulation, the more we are able to utilize that clinical placement space that is so coveted. And so we really talk about that and work on that as a group on how we can promote that. Again, we talk to our new schools that is an expectation. There will be simulation usage to offset the clinical hours needed. And then we did just start a monthly simulation work group meeting for all of our nursing programs. So all of their clinical coordinators are now meeting monthly to share content, share barriers, and then talk about how we can increase simulation usage for all of our programs. And then recruitment. So when we originally started doing the rosters, it was the intention so that we could hire those students. The temp release data that we found was just kind of a bonus that we were not anticipating. But the real reason we did it was to implement rotation to hire practices. We really felt strongly that we wanted to keep Central Texas students that we were training here in the Central Texas area. When I started in 2019, there was no connection between the clinical placements that were happening at the hospitals and their HR departments and their talent and acquisition specialists. They weren't hiring these people, or if they were, it was happening more at a unit manager level rather than at a strategic hospital level through HR. And so since we started this system and having the rosters in there, we're able to see every student who has an upcoming graduation. And so I will send a quarterly report to our HR departments that say, these are your upcoming students that are graduating this semester. I usually do this 2 months before they graduate, so they can recruit them before they graduate, before they go off to another city or another state. And so they're able to offer those students placement opportunities and then hire them. We do tell them which hospital they did the most clinical hours in. So hopefully that would be a good fit for them to get a position long-term. Other things that we have done are our student nurse internship programs. So those are nursing students who are hired on, and they do get some paid for their clinical hours, but they're also helping to fill that role of the patient care techs that we have a shortage in. So they go to work while they're still in nursing school, and then they actually get priority placement for their capstones. And so in their senior year, we find them capstone placements for positions that are open so that they can directly hire in. They do their capstone. It's basically their training, and then they go to work in those after they graduate. So is it working? So that's always the big question, right? And so nursing, we have been able to have significant increases. Just this past fall, Texas State increased their enrollment by 50 students where they typically took 100. ACC increased enrollment to 40 students and anticipate increasing another 40 this spring. St. Edward's enrolled their first cohort that started this fall. And then we have 3 new nursing programs that applied at the Board of Nursing for approval just in July. And I wanted to show you guys, and it's all on your flyer that I provided as well, but this is the nursing graduate data that we have for the last several years. And we have almost doubled the number of nursing graduates in the past 5 years, which is impressive. But what I really would like to highlight is from 2011 to 2019, we only grew nursing graduates in Austin by 14 students. And the reason was because the hospitals told us they did not have any more additional clinical space. Once we got the clinical placement software system and found out that we did have additional space that we were not anticipating, we very much started increasing and using that space strategically so that we could grow our number of students, grow the number of programs in Austin. And I anticipate that this number is going to do nothing but continue to increase so that we can get up to a manageable amount of nursing graduates to fill the need that we have in the Austin region. And while that's great, I know that nursing is not the only focus of this committee. So I did want to talk about some of our severe shortage areas that we work on here in Austin. We have, and this is again, employer-led. And so our employers have told us the major severe shortages they want us addressing are surgical tech, radiology tech, respiratory therapy, and medical assistant. So that's really where we have focused our efforts. We know that there are many other severe shortages out there, but we are focusing our efforts on these. And we have taken the same strategy that we have for nursing and working with employers and education partners to increase those enrollments. So some of the increases that we've been able to produce in surgical tech, we did increase admission this fall by 4 students, which does not sound as impressive as our nursing numbers, but when you think the surgical tech program is only usually enrolling 20 students, an increase of 4 is significant for that. And they anticipate having an additional 4 students in the spring as well. Our rad tech program is one of those that we are hearing severe shortages in, and we were able to increase those enrollments by 6 students this fall, and they anticipating increasing by another 6 in fall 2025. Also working on the LMRT program, which is the certificate program that leads up to rad tech. And then respiratory therapy. So we were able at Texas State to get their approved admissions up to 48, and they currently have 39. And so next fall, 2025, when they do their next enrollment, we will have an additional 9 students in that program. And then we also have apprenticeships. And so medical assistants were a industry feedback that we received about the huge shortage that we had in certified medical assistants. Austin honestly just was not producing enough to meet the need of the community. And so we did a grant program to Texas Workforce Commission and used DOL funds in order to support apprenticeships for medical assistants. We know that many of our industries, they do provide tuition reimbursement, but they don't always provide tuition reimbursement for certification programs. Associate degree and bachelor degree programs, even master and above, yes, they do, but not always to certificate programs. So that's really where we saw a need in the community where we could help address that. Plus, it helps we put efforts into upskilling as well. So those people who are maybe working as a receptionist, we could actually get them back in the clinic working as a medical assistant. Apprenticeships, we marketed it as no experience needed. And so that really drew in a different clientele or people who were interested in the medical field who really had no idea how to get their foot in. Medical assistant is a great entry-level position into healthcare, and we could provide them with the training they needed on site through those employers, and they could go directly in with no prior experience. It's competency-based, and so individuals were able to enroll at a quick rate and then get through the program as quickly as they could master that content. And it's employer-driven. The employers are the ones who hire these individuals on as apprentices, and then they get to train them exactly how they want them. They get to teach them. They have to meet their competencies, but we really looked at they get to train them the way they want them doing it in their facilities. And so once they are certified, they immediately take on a full caseload and start working in that facility, and they already know how to do it because that's where they were trained. The best part, it's an earn and learn model. And so they get paid while they're in these programs. It's an online programs, and so they do their modules at home usually, or some of the employers are even offering them time during their day to work through their modules. And then they do their clinical hours and they get checked off on those competencies. Once they are checked off and they have completed their modules, they sit for their exam. And once they are certified as a medical assistant, part of the apprenticeship model is they are required to get a bump in pay. And so they do get increased to that full certified medical assistant wage. Outcomes, we have trained over 296 apprentices to be certified in the Austin region. Our employers who are working with these programs and are doing the apprenticeships said that they went from having 50 openings for medical assistants every single day to having 5. And so it was really has fit that need that we have. The surplus that we have of people who are interested in it is much higher than we have actual apprenticeship spots for them. So I know that the program works. We've seen it be successful, and I just would really encourage, it is DOL approved apprenticeship. It's already gone through the process. It is on the ETPL approved list for all workforce boards. And so it's on the training provider list, and Workforce Solutions can provide funds for these programs. This could be implemented anywhere in the state tomorrow to immediately start addressing the issues with certified medical assistants. Just to summarize, recommendations that I would have for this committee is I think the key is industry-led. And having those employers at the forefront is going to be vital to the success of any program that is going to increase and grow. They are the ones that provide the majority of that clinical training hours. And so having them be able to meet that need, they need to be at the table kind of steering that committee. A centralized clinical placement software system has been vital just to have the data and information that you need in order to make educated decisions and guide kind of the community on how you can do that. You also know what you need, because if you have a set amount of space, you know how much you can grow. But if you don't know how much space is being utilized, it really is challenging to grow in a specific area, because they do feel overwhelmed at the hospitals, and they feel like they are giving out all the space that they have. I do think it's important for our regional management of that clinical placement space. We are able to be successful because we do work as a community. We do work as that community approach to try and address these issues so that we can work on it. And it's our employers that are telling us, we want you to work on these specific areas. And if they're asking for those specific areas, they need to be able to provide those clinical placement spaces in order for us to grow those programs. Clinical placements equals healthcare growth. We can't grow without them. They are required for every training program that we have, and we want them to be trained well. And so being able to offer those additional clinical spaces gives us those opportunities to grow. Rotation to higher practices. If you are going to have a clinical placement system, you should absolutely be utilizing those individuals in those regions they're working. That is the reason that all of our healthcare providers are doing this, is because they do want to hire these individuals on. And being able to link the students that are already going through their programs and know their system with those HR departments is kind of key. And it really gets the employers buy-in for those programs. And finally, I would just encourage the use of apprenticeships. They already exist. We have approved apprenticeships for certified medical assistant. We have them for patient care techs, phlebotomy, and for pharmacy techs that are all online programs that have been approved from the DOL, and they are on the ETPL list. And with that, I would offer an opportunity to answer any questions that you guys have. I know that's a lot of information very fast.
That's excellent. That's exactly, I think, what we were looking to learn a little bit more about. Any questions from the panel? Thank you so much, Ashley. Really appreciate your being here today. Okay, next up, we will hear from UT Health Houston, who recently conducted kind of a nurse scan, and they're going to talk about the report and the results that they found. So we'll have Elizabeth Mayer, Hired Coordinating Board Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, and Maya Jukic, Associate Commissioner, Department of Research, UT Health Houston. I apologize for butchering. So,
good morning. This is really going to be Maya's show. I'm just going to do a little bit of context setting. So as part of this last legislative session, there was a new program that was put in Rider called the Nursing Innovation Grant Program, not to be confused with the other Nursing Innovation Grant Program that is tobacco funded. So this program was actually not in statute. It was only put in Rider. But the idea was $6 million appropriation shall be used for the purpose of supporting innovation in education programs. So what we did is we partnered with UT Health to do a scan of the healthcare field for innovative practices and insights, and to document the innovation landscape, empirical questions, and training approaches that can serve as the foundation for the program designed for a potential grant program. So the analysis and synthesis of current evidence related to the identification of constraints and opportunities related to increasing the production of nurses, the identification of constraints and opportunities related to the retention of nurses, and then lastly, a systematic approach grounded in past innovative interventions that can be modified to serve current needs. So as I said, we partnered with UT Health, and Ma is going to kind of give what that landscape analysis looks like, which would eventually inform the grant program that will eventually be developed.
Thanks very much. Go ahead, Maya.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And can everybody see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So again, thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. My name is Maya Djukic, and I'm an associate professor at UT Health Cizik School of Nursing. And thank you for the opportunity to present the findings of our healthcare field scan, looking at synthesis of evidence on production and retention of registered nurses in the entire state of Texas. Before I begin, I want to, if I can advance the slides. Here we go. Really recognize the tremendous team that we had on board to conduct this comprehensive scan. We had faculty from undergraduate programs, graduate programs, experts in data evaluation and analysis, statistical expertise, and also a labor economist from the University of Houston Department of Economics, Dr. Amy Chen. I also just want to say a huge thank you to Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board for providing financial investment in looking at all the available and up-to-date data and fresh approaches to trying to solve the nursing shortage in the state of Texas. And also want to commend the Texas Center for Nursing Workforce Studies for collecting robust data. Not every state has data to inform decisions and fresh approaches. So the purpose of our scan was really to focus on data post-COVID-19 pandemic to provide an updated overview of recommendations and really try to focus on fresh approaches to solve the nursing shortage in Texas. The past Commissioner Kelly also issued a charge for our team to have a quality improvement mindset as we were conducting the scan. So what does that mean is that we're trying to focus on the real problem at hand that we're trying to solve, recognize the drivers of the shortage, and then come up with very specific goals for improvement, as well as align approaches for improvement with those specific goals. The last tenet of quality improvement mindset is really focused on centralized data collection, analysis, and sharing of innovations and data so we can learn from each other. And we can see from these morning's presentations that many people are doing really fantastic work across different parts of Texas. But currently, there is really no centralized repository of these wonderful innovations where we can learn from each other. Both on successes and failures to inform a statewide approach to solving the shortage. So as many of you know and have experienced, COVID-19 pandemic has really worsened the shortage of RNs. But the latest data suggests that the shortage is returning to pre-pandemic levels. And what that means for Texas, that there's a current deficit of roughly 45,000 registered nurses. And in this scan, we did not focus on advanced practice nurses. We did not focus on LVNs or faculty shortages. The only group we have examined are the registered nurses. So those are nurses licensed through the NCLEX RN exam, usually completing an associate or a baccalaureate degree in nursing. So the current deficit is at 45,000, and this deficit is projected to grow to 56,000 registered nurses by year 2036. If you look at the national estimates, there is a current shortage of roughly 300,000 nurses, and the supply will really, the demand will outgrow supply by 9%. So Texas is really projected to have a worse shortage than the nation by year 2036. As we all are aware and have learned this morning, resolving the problem of shortages is depending on a really complex set of circumstances and factors, including both demand factors and supply. So on the demand side, we have an aging population that is growing and will require more care, but we also have aging of the nursing workforce population that will continue to fuel the shortage. On the supply end of the equation, key factors that we have considered in this report are limited production of registered nurses by our nursing education system in the state of Texas, but also inability of the healthcare institutions who employ nurses to optimally retain nurses working at the bedside. And we'll review the three key production drivers next. The first driver is having availability of qualified applicants who are willing and able to apply and afford nursing education programs. The second key production driver is program quality. So we're going to review two key quality program metrics, which are graduation rates and NCLEX RN pass rates. So it's not enough just to enroll students in a nursing program. In order to produce nurses on the other end, they have to graduate and they also have to pass the NCLEX licensing exam. And the third driver that we will discuss is program capacity. And I believe this third item has already received a lot of attention this morning. And it's focused on availability of faculty, clinical placements, and preceptors to be able to operate each program at full capacity. So this may come as a surprise to you because it's contrary to the national and the state level narrative that we're turning away thousands of qualified applicants from the nursing programs. They're currently using data that are publicly available on the Texas Center for Nursing Workforce Studies website. We have identified that in 2023, across 56 ADN programs and 61 BSN programs, we had close to 5,000 fully staffed on-field seats available. So what we mean by fully staffed is that they had enough clinical faculty, enough clinical preceptors, and enough clinical placements to accept 5,000 additional students. We also found that BSN programs had more seats than ADN programs, and a larger number of seats are available in the metro ADN and BSN programs compared to non-metro BSN and ADN programs. I'm going to review a number of slides, a number of graphs that we were able to put together. And I just want to emphasize that we were looking at state level data. So what this means is that while some schools do have more applicants that they can handle, there are also many schools that have fewer applicants that they're able to educate. So looking at figure 1, just to orient you briefly, looking at the x-axis, we have years of data collection. So we review data from 2019 to 2023, which was the latest available year. On the y-axis, we have numbers in thousands of applications, available seats, applications submitted, and actual students enrolled. So if you look at the blue line on this graph, this is the line that everybody's talking about. These are the qualified applications. They're not people, they're just applications. We're counting papers or electronic forms in terms of applications. The green line are the number of applications, again, who were offered admission to nursing programs across Texas. The orange line are the number of seats available in each year across all programs in Texas. And then the red line, the one on the bottom, are the actual people, the applicants who enrolled in each program. So if you can see on this graph, for every single year from 2019 to 2023, we had more available seats, looking at orange line, than actual people enrolled in these programs. And then looking from 2022 to 2023, that gap has actually grown because we have new programs that were opened across the state of Texas, but we didn't have enough qualified applicants to fill the new seats. This graph shows the same data, but for ADN programs. Same thing here for every single year from 2019 to 2023. We had more available seats than applicants. The difference between BSN programs, if you look at the blue line, and the ADN programs is that applications to BSN programs are decreasing from 2022 to 2023, where applications, not people, are increasing for ADN programs. We also looked at the data for BSN programs in Texas metro areas. And we see, again, seats available at every single year, and the number of available seats are growing from 2022 to 2023. For non-metro areas, we see a slightly different trend from 2021 to 2023, which is a decline in applications and admissions and enrollments, but still many more seats than applicants across all years. This is data for ADN programs, also in metro areas, different application trends, but same situation with seats. And not to belabor the point, but I wanted to just show you that we slice the data many different ways. And any way you cut it, we have more seats than applicants. So people often then ask, well, what about online programs? And similar to what we're seeing at the national level, and not just for nursing, across all majors, those programs that offer degree options with either full or partial online courses have seen the most growth in enrollments. Again, this is not the trend just for Texas or nursing. We're seeing really sizable growth in enrollments across majors. However, the caveat here is that the quality of programs that are fully online or partially online really requires further study. We're not sharing data here to really highlight any particular online program, but our data, and we have them available, show that generally for fully or partially online programs, graduation rates are much lower than for in-person programs, and there is a small difference in NCLEX performance rates. Just to give you a sense of what's happening across the different schools in Texas, we were able to highlight 5 nursing programs that had the highest enrollments from 2000 to 2020. And the red line is UT Arlington with really robust growth in enrollments. They enrolled close to 1,500 students in 2020. These data are 4 years old, but are the latest available data, followed by Texas Women's University, Texas Tech University, UT Tyler, and UT Health Science Center, San Antonio. So in summary, around production driver number 1, we do want to draw attention to the most immediate problem, which is a limited supply of qualified applicants that are distributed well across the state to fill all the available and fully staffed nursing program seats. And so when we first met with Elizabeth and her team, they said, here, we'll give you the money. You have 3 months. Tell us how to solve the nursing shortage in the state of Texas. And so we said, sure, we can do that. So I was partly joking, but then I was surprised to actually come up with a plan that might work, that our team has come up with a plan. So if you look at this calculation, if we can fill all of these available seats, 5,000 available seats every year for the next 12 years, we can solve the nursing shortage in the state of Texas, of course, given that supply and demand calculations stay stable. The second key point is that we cannot rely on the number of applications to suggest the real situation with applicants, because every single applicant, and now it's so easy, can submit 5 to 10 applications to different schools. So we really need to look at enrollments as a reliable estimate of the supply of qualified applicants to nursing schools and not count applications. In terms of the improvement goals and fresh approaches, we would like to advocate for a state-level campaign similar to the Institute for Healthcare Improvements campaign of, save 5 million lives. We would like to recruit 5,000 nursing students every year to fill the available seats. Similar to what others have said this morning, we really need to create user-friendly and centralized dashboard for parents and students to be able to easily see which programs across the entire state of Texas have available seats. It's not to say that students who are interested in going to nursing school will not always get their first choice. But if you want to go to nursing school, there are seats available in the state of Texas. We also need to develop systems to automatically share student applications among schools and create uniform prerequisite admission requirements among nursing programs following the Texas Higher Education Board Field of Study of Nursing Requirements. We really need to invest as a state on recruiting or hiring professional recruiters and enrollment coaches across all nursing programs, offer scholarships to students, but not just to cover tuition fees and books, but also to provide stipends for living costs, childcare costs, transportation costs. And we also need to think about offering financial incentives to students in neighboring states. So I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but we do have faculty whose own children have been recruited out of state of Texas to attend nursing schools in other states. So we really need to sort of implement a counter campaign to keep students in Texas. And we need to invest more to early outreach to high school students and also middle school students, because they do have to select their CTE program of study in the 8th grade. And do a better job in recruiting across all pre-health and science majors. And offer those immersion experiences through nursing program camps and similar activities. We heard a lot about CTE this morning. It's a really wonderful opportunity for high schoolers across Texas. And I would love to partner with CTE to even better articulate those pathways to nursing schools directly from high school. Is it possible for students in CTE programs to complete a majority of prerequisites to be able to enter directly into a BSN program? Because we do have more seats in BSN programs compared to ADN programs. Moving on to production driver number 2, which is program quality. It was nearly impossible to get data on graduation rates in nursing programs across Texas. Similar to the national system for education quality report card that provides graduation rates at the college level, we really don't have a similar system for nursing programs. And it's tricky because most college graduation rates are calculated on a 6-year cycle, but we know many of our nursing programs operate on an accelerated cycle. So we have upper division nursing programs that last anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So there is really no way to, for parents, for consumers, students, or the state who funds all the public school programs to find out in real time what the graduation rates are. We were able to partner with our institutional research office at UT Health, and they were able to provide us with graduation rates for all UT Health schools. And we found a really wide range of graduations from nursing programs, from a low of 10.2% to a high of 98.7%. So this is not to say that we should penalize programs with low graduation rates, because many of them are positioned in geographically under-resourced communities and accept students who need a lot of support and both academically, but also around social determinants of success, including childcare, transportation, and housing, for example. The other thing to consider is being able to request for all the programs that are state funded a risk-adjusted type of quality report card, similar to what hospitals are using, which take into account sort of the payer mix or the student mix for the programs that students serve. With NCLEX performance, which is the second indicator of quality, if you will, for the program, those data are publicly available, but there is a delay in public access to data. Unlike the programs themselves can obtain semester by semester NCLEX pass rates. So we would like to encourage, again, all the state-funded programs to be able to post those NCLEX pass rates more in a real time, either as an average or a trend over 5 years, because we know every program can have a blip in how well their students perform, but it would be really important to have more transparency about both graduation rates and NCLEX performance rates for all state-funded programs. We did look at a mean NCLEX performance rate for all programs in Texas. For the ADN programs, that rate is currently at 82%. For BSN programs, the mean rate is about 86%. But we did find several programs reporting a pass rate below 50%. And so why is it important to focus both on enrollment, but also on keeping students in the seats and making sure they pass NCLEX exam, again, using simple math? If we were able to fill the 5,000 available seats, but only 85% of those students graduate and further only 85% passed NCLEX, that would really cut the production of registered nurses by 16,500 over 12 years. So in terms of improvement goals and fresh approaches, we would like to, again, recommend a 90% program graduation rate and first-time NCLEX pass rate to ensure a high-quality nursing education experience. And in order to achieve these metrics, there has to be an investment in hiring and training academic tutors, focusing specifically on reading comprehension for students whose native language is other than English and math. We need to invest in peer and career mentor networks, hiring of mental health counselors, and providing NCLEX RN prep tutoring free of charge to all students in Texas nursing programs. We're now going to discuss the production driver that focuses on adequate supply of nursing faculty, clinical placements, and preceptors. And I want to just, again, reiterate that there are programs across Texas who do need more faculty, preceptors, and clinical placements to be able to grow their own programs at the state level. We really should worry about a better distribution of interested students into the existing empty vacant seats. Looking at data from American Association of Colleges in Nursing in 2023, for BSN programs in the state of Texas, there were 133 reported vacant positions for a vacancy rate of 7.5%. Of those 133 vacant positions, 82 needed to be doctorally prepared and 51 nurses needed to have a master's degree. While this report did not focus on APRN workforce, we do have data to show that there is actually a projected oversupply of nurses with advanced practice degrees. And so this can be an ideal pool of candidates that with proper incentives and training could be enticed to pursue roles as faculty. And similar to what has been said before, another key barrier to more APRNs pursuing positions in academia, there is a really large pay differential from what they can earn in healthcare settings, in hospitals and other healthcare settings. So we would really recommend, again, funding for pipeline programs to transition APRNs into nurse faculty roles and improving pay differential, and also helping them pursue doctoral education. Now we're shifting focus to retention drivers of registered nurses. And again, I would just like to, again, looking at data, state that nurses do not leave nursing. They leave their employers. And I think this is often a misconception, both at the national level and the state level. I have been studying nursing workforce issues for 15 years. I've been a nurse for 25 years, and I'm still in nursing, but I have left many employers. So the 25% usually turnover rate that we often hear in presentations about nurses leaving does not apply to nurses leaving nursing. It applies to nurses leaving their employers. And even during the pandemic, only 3% of all nurses in the United States left nursing. In Texas, we currently have 54,000 nurses who are licensed and not working. So if we can get those nurses to work, we would not have a shortage in the state of Texas. And many leading nursing workforce experts argue that there is no shortage of registered nurses. There is shortage of registered nurses who are willing to work under current conditions for current wages. This is not really a surprise. The key drivers of nurses leaving, again, their employers, not nursing necessarily, include retirement, followed by burnout, stressful working conditions, inadequate staffing, and a lack of good management and leadership. We just reviewed national data. We reviewed many different sources of reasons for nurses leaving, and the themes and the factors are the same. However, we also conducted primary data analysis focused on the state of Texas. We used data from the National Sample Survey of Registered Nurses, and we cut the sample for the nurses who were working in Texas. Those who left their jobs cited burnout as the primary reason, followed by poor management and leadership, stressful work environment, inadequate staffing, and poor pay and benefits. For nurses in Texas who were thinking about leaving their jobs, the number one reason was burnout, followed by pay and benefits, stressful work environment, and inadequate staffing. Career advancement and poor management and leadership were also in the top 5 reasons. On the other hand, for nurses who stayed in their jobs, their top reasons for staying were the fact that they liked their job. They had balanced schedule, they liked their salary and benefits, they liked working experience at the site where they were, and they had a community of peers that they liked. So in terms of summary and recommendations on RN retention, we, again, since this was funded by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and their funds go to funding innovations in nursing schools and not necessarily for healthcare settings, we wanted to provide recommendations on what nursing programs can do to help retain nurses once they cross over into clinical settings. And we focused on 3 domains of interventions and strategies that nursing programs can implement to help retain new nurses working in nursing. 1 is transition to practice readiness, 2 is burnout prevention, and 3 is preparing nursing students for emerging and priority topics relevant to nursing practice. In terms of practice readiness, our goal would be to retain 90% or more of new nurses in the first year of practice. And in order to do this, we recommend that nursing programs improve and increase their partnerships with clinical settings around dedicated education units and clinical fellowships that would increase opportunities for high quality in-person and hands-on immersion clinical experiences. We're recommending integrating more competency-based education and also boosting preparedness of clinical preceptors. In terms of the burnout prevention, we would recommend nursing programs increase preparedness of nursing students around strategies that they can use to prevent burnout. And we have cited in our report a number of resources for nursing schools to implement, also integrating trauma-informed education and workplace violence prevention education in nursing programs. And then lastly, when we surveyed nursing employers, especially in the post-COVID-19 pandemic landscape, the feedback we're getting is that nurses who transition to practice in the pandemic or post-pandemic have really struggled with communication, teamwork, and leadership and management, as well as advocating for their patients. They would like new nurses to have better preparedness when using EPIC or similar health information records. So interventions like EPIC Playground or similar strategies could be helpful. There is an increase of presence in telehealth and virtual nursing. So employers would like nursing students to be exposed to these new technologies, as well as use of artificial intelligence for decision making. And lastly, some key topics that nursing students should receive better preparedness around is caring for patients with substance use disorders, mental health disorders, and disabilities. So I will stop here and take any questions.
Any questions for Pam? Thank you very much, Maya. That was an excellent presentation, and it really is an extraordinary study. We will make it available to all of the task force members in the Dropbox file and shared file. But also, if you don't have access to the Dropbox file, we can email it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to hear from UT Health San Antonio, Dr. Sonia Renee Hardin, the Dean of the School of Nursing, about some of their programs.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Are you able to see my slides? There they come.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I came to Texas in 2022, and I came to San Antonio. And I'll tell you, one of the things that really surprised me in 22 was that I was going to be in a city that had 6 new hospitals over the next 4 years. And I was worried because, one, I may myself need health care. And also, how was I going to produce enough nurses to be able to meet the demands? So we have had, of course, our own university here will be opening a 144-bed hospital in December. But prior to that, we've had the university hospital open up a women and children's tower. We've had Christus Santa Rosa over in Westover Hills open up 2 more floors and double their emergency room. We have University Health that is planning the opening of a hospital in Selma, which isn't that far outside of San Antonio, as well as they have already broken ground on University Hospital on the south side. And if you're not familiar with San Antonio, the south side of Texas is more economically deprived, and certainly, I think, going to be perhaps more of a challenge in staffing that particular hospital. So I'd like to go to the next slide. Thank you. So some of the things that we've seen in San Antonio is some good things, such as the majority of our students come from the south of Texas. That's where the majority of them come from. But one of the things that we find is that many of them come to us with not quite as strong a basic science and basic math backgrounds. We don't find those to be as strong as we would like. Some of the other things that we've seen is that a lot of our students have not come from high schools where they have had mentorship. And I think that that's really important in the high school setting. I'll ask you to take a look at the American College Application Campaign. It's literally an initiative aimed at increasing the number of first-generation college students and students from low-income families that are pursuing higher education. I think that you have to think about that particular population when you start to think about increasing the nurses here in this state. And how does one prepare for college? I think that our high schools are going to have to work maybe harder at preparing our students to come into nursing programs. And what I'm saying is that day one that they start high school, they really need to start their college prep checklist so that every student is gearing towards the same direction. And I've heard this in some of the conversation this morning around standardizing prerequisites. I've heard that word standardization, and I'm in full support of that. I think that's critical for this task force to think about. And also, I wanted to share with you about early decision programs. And these are programs that collaborate with local community colleges and universities on early acceptance. So getting students that are in high school that want to pursue the field of healthcare, and this could be any discipline in healthcare. I know that predominantly we're talking about nursing shortage, but any field is getting early on an acceptance of them into a specific path or program. Next slide. I will say that, you know, the barriers, I'm sorry, next slide. Thank you. I will say that some of the barriers in the rural areas are going to be a little bit different, perhaps from urban areas. However, most of them have been touched upon today. Everything from tuition being a major need to be able to supplement students that want to go into a health career. There are some states that have waived tuition for nursing and healthcare programs, and they've done this through state subsidies. And I think that some of the hospitals have also been extremely helpful, not only in the state of Texas, but in other states as well, whereby they've offered free tuition with work commitment. And these have been at teaching and research hospitals. You know, completing prerequisites in high school is really great and really helpful for students. And if they had incentive to do so through fully funded state scholarships, we may see more individuals choosing a path of healthcare. Of course, I do think I've seen in some states that they've targeted state-funded scholarships in those counties that had the highest healthcare provider shortages. And so it was through that mechanism that they had a requirement that students would go back to the counties that they come from and work and provide health care. Some states are, as I said, offering all nursing students free tuition. And, you know, I would love to see that happen in our state to get more nurses in. Because as it's been mentioned, you know, that universities and colleges have seats open and available. We also have to have individuals who are seeking to go into the profession. I also think we need to be designing more 12-month accelerated BSN programs. My accelerated program is a 16-month program. It's not 12 months. I have worked and been in a deanship where I did have a 12-month accelerated BSN program for individuals who already held degrees in other fields that would come in and go to school for 12 months straight and then walk away with a BSN degree. That can help get you nurses out there quickly. And I think, you know, as was mentioned by the prior presenter, You know, getting nurses that want to stay within the hospital setting is the challenge, without a doubt. That is a huge challenge for us. Next slide. We talked about wrap around services for students. And the last state that I was in, there were employers that were providing wraparound services for their employees that were seeking to go on and get education in healthcare. And this included everything from childcare vouchers to transportation, whereby students had bus passes in public transportation, or a university had partnered with local public transportation departments. One of the great things here in South Texas is that UTSA, those students can use our VIA bus system in the city for free. And again, that's a strategy to help support students that are coming from financially disadvantaged backgrounds. Many universities across the U.S. have the students that access what's called the Lyft's Ride Smart program. It's a service that provides college communities with free or discounted transportation with Lyft. So I'd ask you to take a strong look at that particular program. And again, it's about partnering with various industries within the state to help support our students. Food security, insecurity is another issue that I have seen within schools of nursing. Students often need food vouchers. They need a food pantry on campus. And I also think there should be farmer markets located on our campuses that make it convenient for our students to get fresh fruit and vegetables. Food insecurity is something you don't hear a lot about with students, but places that I have worked historically, student groups have taken it upon themselves to, for example, one place I worked had what was called the blessing locker. And it was just open lockers that people would donate and put stuff into. And a lot of times it was non-perishable foods, as well as things like deodorant, toothpaste, toothbrushes, things that you wouldn't necessarily think about being a need, but there are needs for our students. Next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about some alternative educational models, and this was touched on briefly, this apprenticeship mobile program. This apprenticeship was funded, these programs were funded by the federal government, and the last state I was in, the university that I was at had that funding, and we were able to work with a lot of different industries on helping us. And I'll give one example. We had a long-term care facility that literally placed individuals in every role that you can imagine, everything from working in food services to working at the front as a receptionist in what they called a hospitality position, to nursing assistants as well, but pharmacy techs. I mean, the owner of that company had individuals in every single role and was very successful with an apprenticeship style model. So I definitely think we need to be thinking about that. The downside of that is it can take quite a bit of time to complete an apprenticeship program. And while you have a workforce readily within your system, it does take a while before they're able to go sit for various exams, certification exams. I do think we should think about the European model more, that being that when individuals graduate high school, they actually walk away with a profession in hand, so to speak. I know that LVN programs within high schools are not common here in the state. But I do think that we need to be looking at that. I'll share with you Palo Alto Community College, which is on the south side of San Antonio near the new Southside Hospital that's being built, has a high school right on their campus. Those students, when they graduate with an associate degree in the arts. And I recently was talking to Dr. Andrea Flores, who's with our Alamo college system, about how I hope she would think about how she could go about implementing nursing within the high school, because I know they'll be looked to be a feeder of professions into the new Southside Hospital that is being built. And they're expecting that one to open in 2027. So I think that is important for you strategically to think about where are the hospitals in your state? What are the communities surrounding those hospitals? What high schools and community colleges can you leverage or to incentivize to help provide the healthcare workforce in the future for those facilities? So I love the idea of hearing about a map being shared, but I do think on the map, you've got to begin to look at your population and the hospitals, because we know those are the toughest ones to maintain a staffing ratio at. And then who within those communities can you leverage or incentivize, again, whether it be high schools or community colleges, to begin to produce a workforce. Having LVNs come out of a high school is probably your quickest way to start producing a healthcare workforce. And the other thing that we've seen here in South Texas, of course, not only is our population boom, because we've got lots of people moving into the area from other states, but the Texas prerequisites that are required, especially for our second degree students that are moving into South Texas, they hold degrees in other areas. They have not had to meet those high school requirements, even though they hold a high school degree, they hold a baccalaureate degree in something else. They're having to go back to school and do some prerequisites that are required by the state. So lifting those, especially for our second degree students, could help us get individuals through their educational process and out on the market quicker. I also think we should be thinking about LVN to MSN programs, because as we've pointed out, we need individuals that can take on leadership roles quicker rather than later in our hospitals. And also having individuals who at some point down the road may go on to get their PhD in nursing. So producing more MSN students will help us fill our seats in our PhD programs. Summer high school programs are something that I think it's worth thinking about as well. That could be an innovative program set up so that you go 4 summers and you walk away with your LVN and you're ready to start work as soon as you graduate. Next slide. So I think a lot of us have talked about preceptors and the challenges with preceptors. There are states that are giving sizable lump sums of money to preceptors to incentivize them to precept in a variety of clinical settings. I've seen states that are funding individuals to get undergraduate degrees so that they can teach in our clinical courses. I've seen states that are supplementing apprenticeship type of programs. And there are states, the last state that I was in, decriminalized medical errors. And I share that because there are some families that are concerned about having their son or daughter go into nursing. And, you know, the risk of human error being associated with the whole criminalization process of that. We've tried, you know, within hospital settings to have what's called just culture, where individuals step up and are honest when mistakes are made so that we can learn from those mistakes so that we can ensure they don't happen again. But at the same point in time, there is concern and worry about the criminalization process of medical errors. And also touched on too was the violence that we see in the healthcare setting has already been mentioned. We do need to figure out, how do we keep nurses at the bedside? How do we keep a respiratory therapist at the bedside? And what kind of state bonuses are being given? I'm seeing it mainly along the East Coast of the United States, where some states have incentivized to keep individuals at the bedside. And then how do we keep our nursing and health-related educators in the workforce? It was mentioned that you can make more money working in a hospital than you can teaching. So I think we're seeing states are recognizing that now, and there are incentivized bonuses that are occurring. I did see one city, very large city on the East Coast, that the city has taken this on and has started incentivizing individuals that stay within the hospital workforce. Next slide. I'm happy to take any questions, but I will tell you one message I want to leave is that I think the quicker you can produce individuals that are willing to work in hospitals specifically, the better off we will all be. As a citizen myself of the state of Texas, I want to ensure that if I need to seek health care in a hospital environment, that there will be a nurse readily at hand to help me. And I'm sure all of you feel the same. I thank you, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harden. Any questions from the panel? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to hear from the Texas Pharmacy Association, Debbie Garza, the Chief Executive Officer.
On? Am I on now? Okay. Now to switch gears a little bit, talk about pharmacy technicians. And I must clarify that I'm the former chief executive officer as of 3 days ago, but I'm staying on as an advisor for a few more months, the Texas Pharmacy Association. So thank you, Chairman Ford, for the opportunity to speak to this group. I thought maybe what I would do is kind of just briefly go over some stats. I know we're talking about more pharmacy technicians, but I thought it would be great to share with you some pharmacist statistics and see what's happening with regards to the national PharmD trends, a doctor of pharmacy degree. As you'll see, the number of applicants are declining quite a bit. If you look at probably today, about 13,000 PharmD graduates graduate every year. That's going to be down to about 9,000 within the next 4 years based on these applicant pools decreasing. So that's a problem because in many instances, the pharmacists sometimes fill the role of the lack of pharmacy technicians. as well as that's a challenge with regards to pharmacists not having the support personnel of pharmacy technicians. Just to kind of share with you the pharmacy technicians here in Texas, there's about 50,000 pharmacy technicians, and I'll speak to them in a moment about the difference between a pharmacy technician and a pharmacy technician trainee. There's a little over 25,000 pharmacy technician trainees, so about 75,000 total in the state. Nationally, in the first quarter of 2024, there were about 40,000 job postings. Here in Texas, specifically of national, Dallas was number 4 in the whole country. But if you look specifically what we hear from employers, be it hospital, be it community pharmacy employers, the biggest challenges are West Texas, of course, and then Central Texas, Houston, and the Dallas area. The first, West Texas, being just location, the Central Texas, Houston, and Dallas area due to cost of living, sometimes commuting to jobs, et cetera. So now just to clarify between a pharmacy technician trainee and a pharmacy technician. If someone today looks to want to be a pharmacy technician, they must have their certification exam. So most people enter pharmacy personnel staffing as it relates to being a pharmacy technician trainee. So those have to have a high school diploma, equivalent GED, or working to achieve that. They must meet all the requirements with their criminal history checks, fingerprintings, et cetera. They pay a registration fee. And one thing that's important to note is that they may only be a technician trainee for up to 2 years. That's the max. And that's something that'll come up with our recommendation later. And then within that 2 years, they have to take the national certification exam. In Texas, there's a recognition of one that's put out through the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board, or the PTCB exam. And also the National Health Career Association, NHA, also has an exam that Texas also recognizes. And again, to be a pharmacy technician, you again have to pay the fee, go through all the criminal background checks, et cetera. With regards to just the trends in Texas as it relates to sitting for the exam, and this is specific to the PTCB exam, which is the one the majority of the technicians take here in the state. It was the one that was kind of available first before the NHA one became available. But as you can see, we're now about back to the number of individuals sitting for this exam as we were pre-pandemic. So there was a lag, some of that being due to exam sites and such being closed, but we're kind of back to the pre-pandemic level of those individuals sitting for the PTCB exam. Just to kind of give an idea of pharmacy technician pay, in Texas, it's a little higher than the national, about $43,000 annually, a little over $20 an hour. And of course, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, pharmacy technicians is definitely growing faster than average in terms of the need at about 6%. When you look at job satisfaction, this is from a survey the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board did of about 20,000 pharmacy technicians. It's about 85% in general. So pharmacy technicians, for the most part, are satisfied. I have to say, particularly since you've been talking a lot about nurses during the pandemic, there's been a lot of stress, and we've been pretty stretched with regards to what we've all faced in healthcare during the pandemic. What would increase job satisfaction, besides, of course, pay, which is something we hear for all of the health, allied health professions, would be more responsibilities as a team member, as well as opportunities for advancement, career ladders, other opportunities to advance. And then with regards to why they leave pharmacy technician roles, a lot of that, again, due to, besides pay, the lack of career advancement opportunities, as well as just the workload and the volume. As I mentioned, clearly there's the challenges dealing with the public, particularly in a community pharmacy setting, but also the stress and the challenges within hospital settings as well, from a lot of the things you've heard about, sometimes being the nurses shortages and such. So just regarding effects on pharmacies staffing, what that has meant to the community pharmacists, those that practice in your corner drugstore, be it a chain or be it an independent pharmacy, about 76% have said they have experienced shortages within the past 6 months. And 90% of those shortages is due to the pharmacy technician shortages. And then that, of course, has had implications in many instances in terms of having to reduce hours, reduce services that they can offer, with regards to having to increase wages. And that's been a significant challenge because if you look at what the average hourly rate was for a pharmacy technician pre-pandemic to what it is now, it's pretty significant. And in terms of, the reimbursement the pharmacies receive for the prescriptions they fill, it wasn't like there was a change in the reimbursement increasing with regards to the salaries and the hourly rates going up. Hospitals experience the same challenges, the same concerns. I think having heard from many hospital pharmacy administrators, they have about a 21 to 30% turnover. That's pretty significant. And they actually have had to increase pay about 75%. In pre-pandemic, that was only about 30%. So definitely a challenge there. I just highlight some expanded roles for pharmacy technicians, not to get into these, but just talk about how these are some of the things I know that many of our members and others think about as it relates to that career ladder and that opportunity for them to do other things, to be a little more specialized with regards to just not being that dispensing pharmacy technician per se. So now what I wanted to do is maybe take a few minutes to talk about some of our recommendations to you as the task force. First and foremost, I recognize this this task force is not looking at scope issues, but I cannot not say that with regards to maximizing career growth by expanding duties pharmacy technicians can perform. And we have definitely seen that during the pandemic in light of the Federal Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness, or PrEP Act. You've had the pharmacy technicians that have been allowed to administer vaccines, administer immunizations, and that's been pretty significant when you talk about many of not only the COVID vaccines that were needed during the pandemic, but all of the childhood vaccines where the children fell behind with getting their back to school vaccines and such. And that, with regards to the technicians being able to administer vaccines, ends at the end of December of this year. So right in the middle of a respiratory season, come January, February, it's going to be tough in the pharmacies. So I'm kind of warning you now because of the fact that authority expires. And right now, whereas technicians can do the COVID and the flu vaccines under particular training they have to receive under the supervision delegation of a pharmacist. So it's not like they're just doing this on their own, but they have definitely met the requirements and the training to be able to do that. The second recommendation would be to optimize the pharmacy technician workforce by increasing the technician to pharmacist ratio. And that's important because, unlike most other healthcare professionals, doctors, dentists, they get to decide how much support staff they may need. But with regards to pharmacists, they're kind of dictated to a degree as to what kind of support staff they may need. And that's really a challenge if you're in a busy pharmacy. If it's the 5 to 7 o'clock drive home time, you've got cashiers that are also cross-trained to be technicians, and you're having to say, nope, you cannot leave that register. You cannot help pull up a prescription on the computer system to see if they need it refilled. There's just a lot of requirements that really kind of hinder, particularly when you have busy pharmacies during the busiest time of the day. And so with that, we would look to how we can optimize that ratio. And Texas, it did get increased in November, I think, of 2020, 2021. It went to 6 pharmacy technicians to 1 pharmacist. And again, most pharmacies are not by any means staffing at that level, but it really comes into play whenever it's the busiest times, and how can you maximize the people you have back there if in fact they have the training to be able to function in a pharmacy technician role. It's been exciting here listening this morning about the different programs in high school, the technical schools, whenever we were able to participate in the work group 1. But definitely we would support the funding for the pharmacy technician programs in high schools and the technical schools. And it was new to me to hear from one of the other speakers that 8th grade is when they select if there's a particular CTE that they, particular profession that they want to go into. So that's something clearly we'll need to also really look at a lot of our homegrown activities, because many of the pharmacists are working with their local high schools, now moving that to middle schools, and programs to get individuals interested in pharmacy technicians. We'd also like to recommend considering an alternative approach to certification to alleviate test anxiety. I think, some people just are not good at taking tests. And therefore, when they know they have that test anxiety, and because that is the entry point to be a pharmacy technician in Texas, is you have to pass that national licensure exam to be registered here in Texas. It's a problem. It becomes a barrier to entry of somebody who's aspiring to be a pharmacy technician. So are there other alternatives? Are there other ways to look at that? Is there some competency base, some experiences? And whenever Texas first went to the requirement of the certification exam, they grandfathered individuals that had a certain number of years as a pharmacy technician. So, you know, because of the fact that we have the shortages of pharmacy technicians that we do across the state, we should consider some alternative as it relates to just passing a licensure exam or a registration exam. We'd also like to recommend promoting legislation and regulation that allow for expanded use of technology and automation to promote a better work environment. I think we've seen that with legislation that had passed. Can't remember which session it was. I think it was maybe 2021 that looked at the e-prescribing, electronic prescribing of prescription drugs. So as you can imagine, the number of phone calls that reduced from the phone ringing and the doctors calling in prescriptions and such to allow for that. So now if we think about what's next on the horizon, there's a lot of remote work where individuals and the pharmacists can do remote work, but the technicians cannot, where they can do the data entry of prescriptions. And that's also very helpful for those individuals that have transportation issues or disability type issues. And what more will be to come. So really thinking about enabling legislation and regulations. Improving license portability or reciprocity to Texas. So recognizing sometimes there may be a different exam in another state, but they've been a technician, and allowing that to more easily, bring their license into Texas. Enable reentry into the technician trainee status if returning to pharmacy workforce. So I mentioned earlier how they can only be a technician trainee for 2 years, and that's one time. So imagine if they don't pass that exam or they have that test anxiety and they decide to go work somewhere else. And then a few years later may want to come back. Well, they can no longer be a technician trainee. So they will have to come back as a technician, which means they will have to have passed that exam and such. So I think, that sometimes prohibits people from looking at pharmacy again, if they know they've been that trainee and now they can't come back. And then lastly, I know with regards to the work group 1, where I appreciated the opportunity to participate as a stakeholder, there was a lot of talking about the tracking that the Department of State Health Services does with data. And it was a lot on physician shortages and nursing shortages, but not really pharmacist shortages or pharmacy shortages, and 50% of the country has pharmacy deserts. And in many cases, when you have the shortage of primary care physicians, as we have, and many times it's the pharmacist and pharmacy that's the only healthcare provider in some communities. So I think, looking at when you're thinking about the data as a whole, having a way that is at least looked at in our state with regards to pharmacists and pharmacies, because I think we all know if patients can't get their medication, they're going to end up in higher cost, longer term medical care and such. So with that, again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Any questions from the panel? I asked you to come in large part because there aren't a lot of organized organizations that are taking up the cause for technicians. And there are 50 some technician roles and positions in the healthcare system that the Workforce Commission tracks, that TEA is preparing the certifications for. That technician role, I think, is a little bit underrepresented across the board, even in the work that we did here. So thank you for coming in and sort of taking up that charge and giving us a little glimpse into that space. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for the opportunity.
We're gonna take one little deviation from the agenda. One of the things that we've heard about in this process are related to the consortium model for nursing. And I was able to finally track somebody down in California who runs one of their consortium in California. And so it's Marlene Ruiz. She is it's a nurse and allied health professional consortium in California. Marlene, are you on?
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, and can you share your slides? You did not send them to us, so you'll need to share your slides.
I didn't prepare any slides
Okay.
because with only 15 minutes, I consolidated what I was going to share, and I'll just do that verbally. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, our consortium started in 1996. Ann Burgess and I, she was representing academia and I was representing service. And we were bemoaning the fact that it was such a onerous process to get students placed that we decided we were going to streamline scheduling. So we started off with 3 goals. One was to increase the collaboration between all the schools in the community and all the service centers in the community. We invited everybody to a meeting and we took into consideration what each of them wanted to be a partner in our process. We then standardized the criteria for students in all the service settings so that students didn't have to jump through different hoops. I think this was spoken to earlier about with the example of CPR. We standardized on the American Heart Association so that all schools then sent their students to AHA for their CPR certification. And it eliminated a lot of angst on the part of the student when they would go to Children's or they would go to Sharp or they'd go to Mercy, and they'd have to have different prerequisites. We included in this all the immunizations that were required, so that once a student was prepared, they could go to any service area in the community. We streamlined the scheduling through, first of all, a paper pencil process and then an electronic database where all the schools had one person that put in all the requests. They put it in electronically, and on a given date, they were all released at the same exact time so that there was no one-upsmanship on who got to request first. And then the agencies had a date with which they were to respond. And that went along for several years. In December of 22, well, let's see, about early 2000s, we added allied health because initially we were only doing RNs. And then in December of 22, Ann decided to retire. Our website was dying on the vine and we didn't have money to rebuild it ourselves. So we contracted with American Data Bank to rework our clinical placement system. And so that's who we use now. And the team then restructured the process after Ann retired. I stayed on as a historian. They elected a board of officers and they updated the list of requirements for the students and faculty. They reworked some of the criteria for student placement. And we moved ahead then with that system and it's working. The transition was very smooth and is working really well. We place students from, I want to say, close to 35 schools in San Diego County, as well as several schools that are outside of the county that have gained contracts with some of the agencies here for student placement. And we place, I want to say, close to 14,000 student placements a year. In January of 24, the community decided that we wanted to move a little further beyond just clinical placement. So we developed a steering committee and we established 3 subgroups. One subgroup was for academic partnership, and that was to look at the data of the students graduating, being hired, and retention rates. The second group was regulations and data. And California has new laws coming out all the time, as well as the BRN. And so we have this committee is going to track all those changes in the regulations. And they're also going to start to compile the data that we want to use for our future. And then, of course, the third part is our placement, our consortium for the student placement. So this is just starting in January of this year. And so far, we have established some guidelines for each of these subgroups, and we're moving forward. So with that, that's kind of a thumb scale sketch of everything that we're doing. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Any questions from the panel? Thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed some of the presentations. I have to say you're doing some great work in Texas, and hopefully our group, our redefined group, can replicate some of the things that you're doing. One of the things that I really want to address is that we as a group started the high school development of the health career tracks, and that has been very helpful in getting students from the high schools into the application process in the colleges. We also have a very positive transition from the ADN programs to a completion programs at many of our schools here to get their BSNs within a year after graduating with their ADN. And that's real helpful. The students like that a lot, and it's not that expensive. So.
Thank you very much. Great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
All right. Thank you for asking me.
Okay, for the panel, so the food has been delivered today. We have 3 presentations left. So you can, on your own, go. We'll have somebody escort you to the food. There isn't a connecting room like in the other. Or we can wait till the end and then we can all go eat together also. So next up, so we're moving now to what I'm calling the other groups section of the agenda. There are some other folks who are out there also taking a look at the healthcare workforce shortage on a more broad spectrum. And so we're going to hear from a couple of those. We have Health Management Associates, and at a national level, they did a scan of behavioral health workforce shortage initiatives to address that particular aspect of it. And so we've got a virtual presenter, Paul Fleisinger, who's a managing principal, and then Dr. Stephen Palmer is also here today. So is Paul going to talk? Okay.
Do we have the deck loaded?
Miranda, working on it.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's good to see some familiar faces. Again, my name is Stephen Palmer. I'm the managing principal for Health Management Associates Texas office. We are a national healthcare consulting firm with over 700 consultants across more than 30 states. For this presentation, this is about the Center for Workforce Solutions. This was an initiative that was sponsored by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. That's a national membership association of organizations like our local mental health and IDD authorities here in Texas, but it is national, and they sponsored the Center for Workforce Solutions to try to address issues associated with the behavioral health workforce. My colleague, Paul Fleisinger, was only available until noon. So unfortunately, he was one of the real experts and was one of the authors of this study. So I'm just going to kind of fake it a little bit here. So I apologize for that. Let's go to the next slide. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, the Center for Workforce Solutions was
That little clicker right there should work for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's much better. Great. Center for Workforce Solutions was sponsored by the National Council. Is meant to be a multi-stakeholder approach to identify opportunities for addressing behavioral health workforce issues. But to support this this work, the National Council did sponsor a survey of the behavioral health workforce. The results were consistent with some of the other things that you've heard today, in that there is a significant amount of burnout within that workforce. And one other piece that I would highlight is that a third of the surveyed workers did indicate that they spent more than half of their time on administrative tasks rather than clinical. So that highlights one potential opportunity for essentially stretching the workforce that we have, be more administrative simplification. And this is just a snapshot of a number of sort of related headlines from different sources highlighting the breadth of the healthcare workforce challenges. While a lot of the data is negative, the workforce itself is still very passionate and engaged, but there are shortages, at least in the behavioral health space, across all different major categories of professionals. So the Center for Workforce Solutions itself describes itself as a collective impact initiative to revolutionize the mental health and substance use treatment workforce. And it's really focused around driving a common agenda and having common metrics for measuring progress. The way that this study was structured was around 6 different, what they call levers of change. And these are broad categories that could potentially be used to structure any else work. They go beyond just behavioral health. These are the regulation and policy, payment, the clinical model, workforce expansion, organizational culture, and quality and accountability. And within each of these, within the deck, you'll see specific definitions of each of these. And then some of the core activities of the Center for Workforce Solutions were a series of workshops that are ongoing. That's what is the Workforce Solutions Jam. And then a number of, or several committees and work groups. One of the main things that HMA did as part of this work was we looked at a number of studies by other states, federal government, advocacy organizations, membership associations around workforce, and identified more than 400 different recommendations for addressing the behavioral health workforce shortage. And this, these several slides call out several of those recommendations that were identified. One that I would flag in particular, and we've heard similar recommendations from some of the other presenters today, but is that really enabling clinicians to work at the top of their license. And you hear that that's not a new idea. People talk about that a lot. But one part of that, and this relates in part to like the pharmacy tech presentation, but also some others, if you could really have a really strong bottom layer to the clinical stack, and so that the higher level professionals aren't having to do lower level tasks that could reasonably be done by a lower level clinician, then you can have the potential to really do more with what we have rather than just having to add numbers of clinicians. And that's not a scope issue. That really is just a matter of having adequate numbers of folks at those lower levels to support the higher level of clinicians so that they really can focus on those higher level clinical tasks. And so I'll close with that. I would direct you to the Center for Workforce Solutions website, where that crosswalk of those 400 plus recommendations is. And we are in the process of building out a broader behavioral health workforce framework and strategy. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the panel? Thank you very much, Stephen. And our apologies to Paul for missing that timeline. You just never know how these things are going to go. Next up, we're going to hear from the Texas Health Improvement Network. That is Dr. David Lakey, Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs and Chief Medical Officer for the UT system, and Lisa Kirsch, Senior Policy Director for Dell Medical School. Great for y'all to be here today. Really appreciate it.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for the time that you've made for us, and thank you for the time that you're taking to really delve into this issue. As was noted, my name is David Lakey. I currently serve as the Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs at the University of Texas System, and in a previous life had the privilege of being the Commissioner of the Department of State Health Services. And with me is Lisa Kirsch.
Thank you. Yes, Lisa Kirsch. I'm with the Dell Medical School, and I'm supporting Dr. Lakey and the Texas Health Improvement Network on this project.
So we're going to be pretty quick, but what I'd like to do, instead of going over all the data that you've already seen about the workforce challenges that we have in the state of Texas, share with you our preliminary recommendations that the Texas Health Improvement Network is going to put in its policy paper to give to the legislature. Again, these are preliminary. We haven't shared it with our full advisory committee yet, but I think they're going to be complementary to the recommendations that come out of this group. Again, ours are designed for the legislature. Some of these would have to require statute, but most of them could be done by already established mechanisms that are put in place through the rider or through funding. So on the next slide, I guess that's me. Just a little bit of background of THIN. THIN was established back in the 84th legislative session, that was 2015, to provide an opportunity to establish multi-institutional cross-sectional leaders, to an opportunity for them to get together to talk about health in Texas and to develop solutions in a nonpartisan way to catalyze population health improvement and health equity. One of the mechanisms that we've found to be effective in doing this is to do deep dives on specific health issues in Texas. We've done them on telehealth, on partnerships between food banks and healthcare partnerships, between rural opportunities for rural health communities and health systems, and primary care and social services integrations, and one on how can we use data better in the state of Texas. Last year, our advisory board said the most pressing issue that we have that we needed to solve was the healthcare shortages that we have, and asked us to do a deep dive on opportunities to improve the workforce here in the state of Texas. Our plan is to release our report probably in late October. A lot of it focuses on primary care, on nursing as part of it, but also behavioral health workforce. And these recommendations, again, will be shared, and I hope will be very complementary to the work that you have been doing. So with that, I'm going to let Lisa share with you the process that we've gone through over the last year, and then we will go through the 6 recommendations that we've put together.
Sure. So THIN, we got a large group together last December just to talk about our process and what we were going to be asking folks and what to focus on. And then based on that, we conducted 20 different key informant interviews through the spring, which gave us a lot of insight into a lot of the great work that's already going on around the state, right? Some of the same things we're hearing today. And then based on those interviews, on July 10th, we convened a meeting with those folks and others to discuss workforce adequacy. Also, we had panels on the pipeline, rural health, and integrated health. And again, we were focusing on 3 different areas. So primary care, nursing, and behavioral health. So a pretty wide charge, right? So we had representation on all of those, both in the key informant interviews and on July 10th. And then once we get approval of that advisory council, we'll release our findings and recommendations in a report, probably late October. And this is just a list of who those key informant interviews were done with. We didn't get to everybody we wanted to, but we did get a pretty good cross-section representing, again, primary care, nursing, and behavioral health. Also Chair Daniel from the Texas Workforce Commission, Of course, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board was with us on July 10th, so some cross-sector representation as well. And then the next slide here just includes the names of the organizations that presented at that July 10th meeting. So we had a lot of other folks there, but we're grateful, and you'll see some crossover between this list and the group that we did key informant interviews with, right? For everyone who came and joined that discussion, which was great. So we're going to quickly just go through at a high level our recommendation areas and then potential specific recommendations. The first one's pretty broad, and I think it mirrors something that you all are looking at, but we know that Texas is going to continue to have significant workforce shortages in primary care nursing and behavioral health. And so we want to strengthen Texas's data-informed strategy, right, to guide state policy in those key areas.
So there's a couple of ways that we could use to address this. I do think we need to be smarter related to our workforce, and not only in nursing, but in primary care. A lot of conversation about what are we doing in primary care and how we could be smarter in developing that workforce. And so a couple of examples that are already established, or there's examples of them already established, is first an ongoing cross-agency structure to assess Texas's healthcare workforce needs and develop an integrated plan to address workforce shortages. And so keywords here is ongoing. I think the work of this group has been very important, but I don't think this is a one and done type situation, that we need that ongoing analysis. And so in the area of behavioral health, there was a similar challenge that we had, there are a lot of agencies doing work, a lot of institutions doing work, but they really weren't collaborative. And so Senator Nelson established the Statewide Behavioral Health Coordinating Council just to bring those entities together on a regular basis so that one agency knew what the other agency was doing, and you had a menu of those opportunities, those initiatives that were taking place in Texas, and they're provided to the Texas legislature on a regular basis so that they can understand how all these programs that they're investing in are working together or not working together. It seems to us that we need to do something similar for the workforce challenges in Texas, that this is such a big issue, it's such a big part of our economy, that we really need to have that ongoing analysis of how the investments from the state are working together and what opportunities to improve that synergy. The second one is to expand the role and the resources of the Health Professions Resource Center. The Health Professions Resource Center, I think you've had testimony from that group here. It's part of the Department of State Health Services. They have been able to improve the work that they've been doing in nursing due to a statute by Kyle Janik back in 2003. But I believe that there is additional work that they need to do, not only in nursing, but in other areas. And so investing in that already established structure and guiding them on the areas that they need to work on, I think would be of benefit to the state of Texas.
So the second broad area, and you all are diving even deeper into this, right, is pipeline. And so, yes, we heard a lot about this, and we've heard a lot about it this morning, right? Increasing awareness of health careers in middle school and high school, streamlining training and creating career ladders, supporting curricula that allow students to obtain stackable certifications, improving advising for health professionals, students in colleges. We've heard that that's a gap, and supporting innovative models of education.
So again, we believe these are key and are very consistent with the testimony that you've heard related to the value of stackable degrees to allow individuals to learn and earn, to be able to build their career, to have apprenticeships, to leverage our community colleges, but also to reach into high schools, middle schools, and high schools. And I think one of the key questions when we hear about these programs in middle schools and high schools is it uniformly available across the state of Texas? Having had kids that have gone through the system here in large urban areas, they have very good programs like that. They're not necessarily available in rural Texas and in the southern part of the state and other areas, and that these are the areas that we need to invest in. And so a couple of of tools that are available in the state of Texas. We have something called AHECs, the Area Health Education Centers. And these are based at our academic institutions. They were better funded in the past. And now most of the funding that they receive is from HRSA with specific direction from HRSA that limits some of the things that they could do, that they have that partnership, that availability in schools, and that is an already available tool with further investment could leverage in rural areas the reach out to high school students and middle school students so that they have the same type of opportunities that my kids had in the more urban areas. We've also heard that, again, the second bullet point there complements that of leveraging those opportunities for kids that are in rural areas, that some of our universities have summer school programs. UTMB does that for nursing. Other rural areas, universities have these type of summer schools for the kids that are in the more rural areas of the state, so they can spend a week at an academic health science center and really see the opportunities related to health, whether it's in nursing or in medicine, really open those doors. And those are opportunities for us to invest in to better provide those opportunities to our kids.
So our third one, and this is broad, is how do we incentivize Texans to train and stay in jobs where we know we have a shortage, and we also know that these areas are especially impactful for improving health. The areas that then asked us to look at, especially in community-based settings and rural and medically underserved areas.
So again, the key words there in the rural and medically underserved areas, that if we don't train students in those areas, it's not likely that they're going to go to those areas. A lot of our universities have specific programs to reach to those kids. But a couple options for the legislature to consider. One, increase or at least maintain the amount of funding that's available in the existing financial incentives. And we need to also, I think, improve the evaluation of those programs to make sure that they're being fully utilized. There was a bill passed last legislative session, House Bill 400, that had funds available for psychiatric and behavioral health innovation grants. Again, that bill passed, but it wasn't funded. That would fund psychiatry training programs. It would also fund behavioral health training programs, opportunities to innovate. We believe the legislature should strongly consider funding that program. This next session, they approved it. So let's use that tool to improve the behavioral health workforce in Texas. We also heard the need to reward those medical schools and the GME programs that are actually producing a larger number of primary care physicians. If you look at the data, the type of physician that increases the population health, the life expectancy of individuals, it is primary care. And there's some medical schools that do that better than others. And if that is a key issue for the state, we need to invest in those programs and give them an incentive so that their students stay in primary care. And we also heard about the value of the federally qualified health centers and the incubator programs that we've used in the past to establish more FQHCs. And so I think this is a win on several levels. First, it provides more primary care and able to draw in the funds, the federal funds for those, for that primary care. But it also allows us to use them for training in ways that we haven't done in the past. So we need to grow the FQHCs and leverage them in the educational process for our upcoming medical students and behavioral health students.
So you all have heard a lot about the clinical training capacity for nurses, and we heard about that for nurses, also for behavioral health and community-based primary care. And just that in all three of those areas, we are struggling with our clinical training capacity.
I forgot to change the slide. And so a couple of things that we're doing in Texas that could be leveraged a little bit more is to we have a program we call CPW, the Community Psychiatric Workforce Expansion. It's part of an initiative we call the Texas Child Mental Health Care Consortium. And we have good data that when we put psychiatry residents into the public mental health system, they're more likely to stay in the public mental health system. That is actually a great training environment for them. We believe there's options to do that more for other types of residents in other types of community health clinics, such as the FQHCs. We've also heard of the challenge related to training to become a counselor or a master's level psychologist in the state of Texas. And there's several issues here that I think are solvable. One has to do with the challenge of individuals graduating from school, but and trying to do the work of a social worker, but also at the same time having to pay somebody to mentor them, to oversee them, and it costs them a lot. And so not only are they not getting paid a lot, they're having to now pay for that supervision. And there's ways that we could solve that as a state to be able to provide that to, especially to individuals that are in the more rural areas of the state. We also have invested in a variety of programs for social workers and licensed professionals, professional counselors through ARPA over the last several years. We believe there's an opportunity to expand that coming out of this time period where ARPA is available. And there's an opportunity to allow licensed master social workers, LPCs, and others to work towards their clinical license, who are working towards their clinical license, to have the ability to bill Medicaid for that psychotherapy. And so can we use Medicaid, leverage Medicaid to fund that initiative? And then, and I believe this has been brought to this group, another bill, Senate Bill 25 from the last session, could be used to expand clinical rotations across the state of Texas, but it was not funded. We believe, again, there's an opportunity to fund a bill that was already passed by the legislature to expand the clinical rotation sites for nurses and a variety of other individuals in Texas.
And we heard a lot in the thin discussions about not just growing the workforce, but optimizing the current workforce. So how do we, do better with who's already, who we already have in the workforce, supporting innovative care models, leveraging technology. What can we do with our existing workforce to optimize access, quality, and reduce burnout? And so we had a lot of recommendations on that.
So we believe this is an important strategy, that we're probably never going to have all the workforce that we want in the state of Texas, especially in rural areas. And so what can we do to support our rural providers and leverage them the best we can? One way to do that is use integrated primary and behavioral health care. There's models that brings mental health into the primary care settings so that we can provide more holistic care for individuals. We can use telehealth better. We've been able to use, through the consortium, a variety of models to provide pretty much instantaneous consultative services to primary care providers related to mental health for kids. I think there's an opportunity to expand that to other populations. There's Project Echo that a variety of our institutions are involved in, that is a learning opportunity for rural physicians so that they don't have to send a individual that has maybe like hepatitis out of their community to one of the larger areas, but they get the mentoring from the large academic medical centers so they can keep that individual in-house at their facility. And a variety of other opportunities to leverage technology to optimize the care, access, and quality. And by doing that, making the experience of being a primary care provider in a rural area more fulfilling and less likely to have burnout.
And then last but not least, this just seems kind of like a no-brainer. There's discussions at the federal level on different topics that would be beneficial to Texas's workforce. So just leaning in on those, and a couple of examples are here.
So just two opportunities to bring to your attention of what's going on in the federal government. There's a program called the Conrad 30. And so every year when I was the commissioner of DSHS, there'd be 30 applications that would be brought to me that had been reviewed by a variety of individuals that came for my approval. And these are individuals that trained in the state of Texas at one of our residency programs, and they would like to stay in the state of Texas versus having to go back overseas because of the J-1 visa and then trying to get back into the United States. These are well-trained individuals that have been good physicians in the state of Texas. And Texas just gets 30 of these per year. Montana gets 30 of these per year. Every state gets 30 of these per year. And so there is work taking place at the federal government level to rethink the Conrad 30 so that if other states don't use those 30 positions, they could be available to the state of Texas. And at an ongoing analysis, we could build that from 30 to better suit our needs here in our state. Another initiative that is taking place at the federal level is to relook at the Medicare GME policy framework. There's a bipartisan policy framework that's being looked at to invest future funds into the areas that we need to have physicians, whether in the rural areas or in primary care, psychiatry, to make sure that those investments are made, those future funds are made available and are invested in those specific targeted areas. And I would complement this recommendation to another message that we've heard that we really need to expand the amount of GME that we have in the state of Texas. Right now, we have a goal of 1.1 GME slots for every medical student. We'll include this in the report of changing that goal for the legislature to change that goal to 1.3 GME slots for every one in medical school graduate. So with that, these are our 6 recommendations. Again, these are preliminary. They need to be shared with our advisory committee. We're trying to be careful with the timing because of your work, all this great work that you're doing. But these are the 6 buckets that we're looking at right now with further detail in the rest of the report. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Any questions from the panel? Thank you for being here today. Okay, this is our last presentation, last but definitely not least. John, I am not going to try your last name, but Texas 2036 with some recommendations focused on workforce, which I thought was an interesting, a different take than some of the presentations we've heard.
Well, thank you all. I know I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to move quickly, but I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank the staff at the coordinating board for all they've been doing to support you. And of course, thank you to Governor Abbott for appointing this commission to tackle this important issue. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Texas 2036, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that uses data to try to tackle the state's biggest challenges. And as y'all are convened here today, it is no accident, I think, that y'all have been looking at tons and tons of data from various presenters to attack this challenge that is essential for our state's future. So I'm going to try to take a role here in kind of piecing some of what you've already heard together and hopefully adding a little bit of additional flair. There are some statements made earlier that I thought were very helpful in terms of framing this. There was a professor earlier from UT Health in Houston that talked about the limited supply of qualified applicants. And I know Dean Harden mentioned specifically that our high schools are going to have to work harder. I think that was the exact quote. And what I'm going to do is talk about some things that are already in motion and some things that can be bolstered to make our high schools and our community colleges a better part of this system, optimizing things that are already in motion at times because of some great actions by the legislature over the last 5 years. But obviously, there's still room for improvement. So let's level set some data. One of the things that Texas rightly brags about is our 90% high school graduation rate is excellent. It is consistently among the top of the nation. But buried underneath that is some challenges and some opportunity. So within that, we have about 76% of our high school graduates that we are calling college, career, or military ready. And I will be blunt, many of the indicators we use to denote that you are college or career ready are not particularly rigorous. And we see that evidenced in part by the fact that only 36% of our high school graduates are going on to receive any sort of post-secondary degree or career credential within 6 years of graduating from high school. So room for improvement. The good news is improvement is happening in Texas public schools right now. When we look at the number of associate's degrees, the number of level 1 or 2 career certificates or IBCs, these are the industry-based certificates that you heard Monica from TEA talking a lot about earlier. They are going up. They're going up even as the state is working to make them more rigorous, more career aligned, better. So you're not getting those Microsoft Word credentials in here. It's like real stuff that has a career value. That is about a third of high school graduates in Texas are now getting those in 2023, which is a dramatic upturn. I will note that about 12% of them are in health science pathways. So, trending up, but a small piece of the pie right now. One other area of real opportunity that our state has been investing in are these college and career-ready high school models. Particularly, I'll highlight the kind of light blue, which is a P-TECH model that y'all may be familiar with. These are the most. This is the best of the best in terms of focusing on both college and career readiness in our high schools. And they are growing. They have been a commitment from the legislature for the last decade. But it is, again, they're not everywhere and not every student has access to the same level of career education in their current systems. So last session, y'all are probably aware that the legislature passed House Bill 8, which completely overhauled community college finance to move to an outcomes-based model that's oriented around the attainment of credentials of value. Now, one of the things that's really exciting about HB 8 is how it interrelates with a previous bill that was passed by the legislature in 2019, House Bill 3, which completely overhauled how public school financing is. When these two bills operate together, they have the unique ability to focus on directly incentivizing credential attainment in a high school environment. Now, how does that work? The math gets big. So when we think about what life was like before HB 8, 97% of high school students had access to dual credit. 30% of high schools had at least one student earning an associate's degree, but only 3% of students were earning an associate's degree while in high school. With House Bill 3, there were $3,000 to $5,000 outcomes bonuses made available if you complete a credential in high school. There are other ways you can get it, but for this purpose, let's dwell on that. Simultaneously, HB 8 makes available 2 bonuses for high school students. You are able to get a bonus for taking 15 hours of dual credit and for completing a credential. So for a student who is in a high school who via dual credit attains a credential of value, the state of Texas is offering a combined $7,500 to $15,000 per student in additional outcomes funding for the same act. It has to be the right act, a valuable act for our workforce and that student. But you, again, if you are, especially these are tiered by student income, they're tiered by high demand fields. The potential here as HB 8 is implemented and as these two programs are banded together is tremendous. Fortunately, there are high schools across our state that are starting to take advantage of it. These two are just quick examples. I know y'all have been talking about expedited pathways into education. Fox Tech in San Antonio will allow you to earn an IBC in, pharmacy, phlebotomy, et cetera, at no cost. It also has available 6-year programs, similar to what you heard some of the individuals talk about earlier. The HEAL School in Houston and Aldine ISD is a great example of a partnership with Memorial Hermann, again, getting that employer side engagement in. It's brand new. But again, this idea of how can we have a 5-year program that starts getting students on these pathways in an expedited way, leveraging all these funding sources in a sustainable long-term way. Now, you might say, San Antonio, Houston, they're big. The good news is there are options available for rural Texas as well in this. Last session, the legislature passed what was called the Rural Pathways Excellent Partnership, or RPEP. It's modeled after a program that was launched in Brooks County to basically allow a whole bunch of small rural school districts to specialize their high schools and then allow students to pick which one they wanted to go to, even if it was in another school district. The legislature last session has allowed for that to scale to a certain extent. There are some caps on it we'll address in a moment. But what you see in these environments is the ability for rural Texas to start to compete in terms of program differentiation and course offerings with its more urban and suburban counterparts, which is huge as we think about meeting health supply area challenges. I know there's a staffing problem, plus the some of the economies of scale when you're dealing with rural Texas. Now, one thing that I'll say as a baseline, as an organization that loves data, is we do need to be cognizant on a lot of what we work on and tailoring programs to meet long-term workforce needs, that there are some data limitations that Texas faces, and that a continued investment in the tri-agency data infrastructure, that's the TEA, the Workforce Commission, the Coordinating Board, is important. Because as we try to do things like solve for rural Texas, it is helpful to know where an employee actually works. And in our current data systems, if your business is headquartered out of Dallas and you work in Texarkana, they will think you work in Dallas, and it is really hard to help meet these regional solutions and regional needs when our own state data systems can at times give us inaccurate snapshots. So looking beyond into some concrete recommendations for how we can scale some of these models. One, PTECs are fantastic. One of the things we hear from practitioners in the field is that the per student allocation is not sufficient to meet up with the added cost that comes with that rigor. We can also talk about startup grants. I know earlier you heard, I believe it was Dusty Moore talking about JET grants and the startup costs of some of these programs. You know, it's hundreds of thousands at times to get a good program started up. You scale that out to millions because we got 2,000 school districts, but there are a lot of opportunities here that at a by state standards small investment, we can have a large impact on the future. We can lift the cap on the number of RPEP programs. We can improve our state data infrastructure, and we can add some of those financial incentives specifically targeted towards high demand fields in the medical sector as it makes sense to, again, overcome some of those barriers to entry on the pipeline. The most important thing I would say, though, is the importance of having, in addition to smart incentives, big goals, right? Like we as a state can have big goals, and there is no reason we as a state cannot say every student in a Texas public high school should have access to a career-aligned credential of value by 2030 or 2032 or wherever it might be, and then work back from there. What are the investments we need to make, and what portion of that should be healthcare? What portion of that should be welding? What portion of that should be other high demand fields that are important for our state? When we then think about how we align our incentive schemes underneath that, it's important for us to take seriously the fact that our A through F system today, which has been subject to lawsuit and thus not fully in place, is can be made more rigorous if we want to achieve those goals. And when I say more rigorous, there's a problem in our A through F system that you are awarded the same amount of high school points for one dual credit course as you are for an associate's degree. So if you're trying to actually solve for a pipeline issue using our high schools, and you want more students to be emerging from our high schools ready for the jobs of the future, we need to reward the high schools for doing the hard stuff more than for doing the easy stuff. And that is a difficult legislative conversation to have in the current political environment, but it is important essentially that we, again, align our expectations and our accountability with what we actually desire for our students and their future and our workforce. I know I've talked a little bit about high school here. I do want to note that the challenges that we face in Texas public schools do not start in high school. We have work that we need to do throughout the entire K-12 system, and the legislature has been making some key investments on this in recent years, but we are dealing with, much like the rest of the nation, some significant declines, particularly in math and science scores in recent years. There are policy options available here that may be outside of the scope of this organization, but in terms of investing in math academies and other math interventions, there's a lot of data showing up that's saying just having kids in school a little bit longer, an additional days of the school year program that was started in House Bill 3 in 2019, really seems to be closing the gap in terms of math readiness. So again, if you were to expand that program to include middle school, your odds of having better prepared high school students and then better prepared applicants after high school will improve as well. So we need to, this problem ain't going away anytime soon. So let's address all phases of the pipeline. It's been mentioned earlier that there are a lot of opportunities in terms of the stackability and apprenticeship models that are out there. There are models that are being used in other industries, like the teacher pipelines and the teacher apprenticeship programs that allow you to basically take an expedited course and then earn while you are learning. That type of model where you're able to, do 2 years of college before you're able to start having a structured mechanism is certainly worth evaluating and scaling. And then last but not least, I want to reiterate some concepts that were talked about earlier in terms of both competency-based learning and expedited pathways. There's a lot of really good, exciting work happening in terms of the micro-credential and short-term credential opportunities that can be those stepping stones into those future jobs. And when we think about high school and we think about other opportunities to leverage the community college infrastructure, the more you're able to think about, like, what can we do during a senior year? What can we do in 6 months, 12 months to help get a person find their career footing? Those types of investments can have long-term benefits for the state. So that's all I got. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the panel? Thanks, John, for being here today.
Thank you.
So that's our last presentation today. I want to thank everybody for all of the information and feedback. We've literally, I think we've really heard nearly 50 or 60 presentations if you put them all together from the workshops and from the task force process. We've heard from over 50 or 60 institutions or stakeholders in a variety of different ways, and have had several hundred individuals kind of engage in this process. Every presenter has had the opportunity in a workshop to participate in the full discussion. And so we've gotten an extraordinary amount of feedback. We will be working with the task force members and everyone to get that report finalized by the end of the month. And so we'll be reaching out to you. Anyone who has anything they'd like to be considered in that process, please for sure get it to us by Friday. And I thank you all for being here today. And we do have lunch upstairs for the panel if you have a few moments to join us. So thanks, everyone. I want to thank the staff at the Higher Ed Coordinating Board who have really gone well out of their way to make sure that each one of these meetings has been successful. And so thank everybody.
Thank you.